happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
Why was Mike Waltz let go?
So it wasn't let go. He is being made ambassador to the United Nations, which, of course, is a Senate-confirmed position. I think you can make a good argument that it's a promotion. But we brought Mike on to do some serious reforms of the National Security Council. He has done that. I like Mike. I think he's a great guy. He's got the trust of both me and the president. But we also thought that he'd make a better UN ambassador as we get beyond this stage of the reforms that we've made to the National Security Council. Look, I think the media wants to frame this as a firing. Donald Trump has fired a lot of people. He doesn't give them Senate-confirmed appointments afterwards.
President Trump is ready to unveil his big, beautiful budget tomorrow. The White House has given GOP leaders a list of wants after the president met with a group of lawmakers today.
Federal agents announced the biggest illegal immigration roundup in Florida's history. More than 1,100 people were arrested last week.
And Secretary Pete Hegseth directing the Secretary of the Army to cut wasteful spending. The Army is planning a sweeping transformation that will merge or close headquarters, dump outdated vehicles and aircraft, slash as many as 1,000 headquarters staff in the Pentagon, and shift personnel to units in the field.
Shein and Temu, these are two brands that made a name for themselves by being able to ship directly Chinese goods to U.S. households dirt cheap, really cheap. And so now you're seeing Shein raising prices and Temu putting the import tax right into your cart. This administration closed a loophole that allowed these low-dollar goods to be shipped directly to U.S. households.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily here live, Washington, D.C. Today is May 2nd, 2025, Anno Domini. The jobs report that came out today absolutely smashed expectations from Wall Street, especially the same Wall Street that I was told, oh my gosh, President Trump is going to destroy everything. The tariffs will never work. The tariffs, they're losing their minds. Do you hear how the tariffs are, the complication, the calculation of the tariffs wasn't good. It wasn't good. It wasn't set up right. Now, look at the jobs report. Came in tens of thousands, I think 40,000 or 50,000 more jobs than were expected by Wall Street. We are only on the cusp. This is the very beginning of the Trump job boom in America. Yeah, only 100 days is all it took for Trump's job boom to get launched. And analysts are scratching their heads. They're saying, well, I don't know what could happen. Why could it be that the tariffs would do that? I don't know. Well, I'm not sure, because maybe you could actually let the man cook. Just let the man cook. Also, by the way, not only did he stun Wall Street with these numbers, but what have we seen? Well, and thanks to Zero Hedge, they've got a chart up. Let's look at jobs that actually went to Americans rather than foreign-born workers. American-born workers up 1 million. Foreign-born workers down 410,000. Well, folks, that's what I voted for. So I'm going to take my I got what I voted for award and pin it right up to my wall next to the other several hundred of them. Look, there's a lot of people who didn't get this, and I'm just going to say, maybe you need to stop yapping and start listening. By the way, we're also tracking these reports, U.S. saying that they're now pulling out potentially of peace talks with Russia and Ukraine. However, I think that this might be another negotiation tactic. We'll see what actually takes place. This, of course, comes from Russia coming out and slamming the mineral deal that the U.S. and Ukraine signed a couple of days ago. We're going to keep an eye on that. And of course, we're in direct communication with members of the administration every day to figure out exactly what's going on so we can get the story to you, the American people. That's what you hear here every day. Human Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. We'll be right back.
Time for everyone to understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec here, back live, Human Events Daily. We are in Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful day in Washington, D.C., and it's an incredible day in America because President Trump's job numbers are stunning, absolutely stunning, Wall Street. And you know what? Sorry, the tariffs are working. Folks, President Trump has always put America first. He's securing our borders, he's strengthening our economy and standing up to global elites who would rather see us fall. And just like Trump is fighting to protect America's future, you should be fighting to protect your financial future too. And I want to welcome in everyone to hear this on the Salem Radio Network. While others are distracted, gold is quietly making history. It's hitting record highs. It's moving part of our savings into real physical assets like gold and silver that doesn't depend on Wall Street. That's a smart move. Thinking about protecting your retirement is not enough. Taking action is. Roll over part of your IRA, 401k, TSP, or make a direct purchase of gold and silver today and enjoy the peace of mind that comes with it. I trust my partners at Allegiance Gold to make that process simple and secure for you. Call them now at 844-577-7676 or visit protectwithposo.com. That's 844-577-7676, protectwithposo.com, and get a free gold coin on qualified investment. America is worth protecting, and so is everything that you've worked for. Are very excited here on Human Events Daily today. We have a commissioner of the FCC actually joining us here on the program. So I've got to be extra careful that I stay within FCC guidelines today because we got to be careful, folks. We got to be careful. The hall monitor is here and they're going to be checking every single word that we say. Folks, it's Nate Symington. He's a commissioner of the FCC. Welcome to the program.
Delighted to be here. I think we got a lot of cool things to talk about today.
Well, Commissioner, I'd love if I could, and I know it's not exactly your lane, but I'd love to get your comment on this jobs report that's just come out, because I think it really is stunning. A lot of people out there who said, how can jobs be up this much given all of what we were told was a tumultuous stock market and a tumultuous economy over the last couple of weeks?
Right. Well, there's a famous saying that originated with Warren Buffett, that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine, and in the long term, it's a weighing machine. So when you see a lot of volatility in the stock market, it's a sign that people aren't necessarily sure which way to jump. And it's worth remembering that lots of people on Wall Street make a lot of money, not on betting on the long-term valuations of the company, but instead betting on, for whatever company we're talking about, betting on a particular trading direction. So it's a little bit like if you're handicapping a sports spread or something like that. It's not necessarily important to win or lose. It's important to have an advantage over the spread to be the smart money and to buy and sell your positions on that basis. So what we could look at is a lot of volatility causing people to shake money out of the system and get on the sidelines because they're just not sure how the strategies they've used for the last 5 years are going to succeed on a forward-looking basis. All of a sudden, maybe long-term valuation has become a bigger player than it had prior. So I'm not a finance professional, but that's my amateurish read from the sides, that at this point, the real economic numbers are going to be much, much more interesting than watching the stock ticker.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I was kind of making a joke the other day when, there are some people I said, tell me how I know you bought NVIDIA high without you telling me you bought NVIDIA high. Like, I get it. All right. There are certain people that when certain policies are announced, they get very upset about that. But in this profession that we do, the question is, it's not about what affects us directly. It's about what's actually going on in the country. And this is something where, by the way, this idea of onshoring, this idea of providing jobs for the American people, this is exactly what President Trump campaigned on. And, I'm not trying to be a cheerleader here, but I'm pointing out, I'm calling balls and strikes. This is precisely what he said that he would get to work doing. Here we are at exactly 100 days in, and he's got a Trump job boom that is, by the way, it's not something that I'm predicating. It's something that's actually seen in the data. That's what's going on writ large across the country right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there was a report recently that showed that 25% of Americans would be willing to work in manufacturing. The people who don't like the idea of manufacturing, perhaps they've never had anyone in their family who is involved with direct or primary production, and maybe they just have an email job, so for them it's not appealing, or they don't think it would be appealing. They looked at that number of 25% and said, "Wow, this proves that manufacturing will never find takers in the American workforce." Thing is, only 8% of Americans currently work in manufacturing. So my friends who do manufacturing were over the moon ecstatic, saying, look how many more people want to come work for us. So this is one of these things where it's very easy to misread the tea leaves from a comfortable berth at a DC desk. There are a lot of real Americans who have, perhaps they or their parents had real production jobs that were sources of pride and that were great options for them. And then when those went away, it's not as though they just sat around unemployed forever, but there's a certain amount of, part-time security guard, gig economy in there. I think there are a lot of people who want to get back to work. And as the United States, I think we've got a huge amount of capital that would love to employ them. It's just a matter of getting the parts right.
Well, and that's actually a great point that you bring up, though. People willing, but also there's a lot of people who don't necessarily have the training or the family experience, because a lot of these jobs, right, this is something that has been lost as we've moved our society more in search of these elusive at some, the service sector jobs, the service sector jobs, the service sector jobs. I remember first time I heard about that when I was, I think still in college. And we're going to move to a service sector kind of. I said, what does that mean? Who are we serving? What are we producing? What are we actually making? And nobody can ever really explain that to you. And ultimately, it's because there's a hollowing of the society. There is no primary industry. This is something, of course, Vice President Vance talks about all the time, because he's literally lived it in a town where they once had a primary vector for their economic activity being factories, or in much of Appalachia, you see mining, of course. Coal mines, now, of course, drilling with fracking and the LNG fields in Lake Marcellus Shale out of Pennsylvania, where I'm from. But we really have lost a lot of this. At one point, it was generational knowledge. Now I would even just say it's national knowledge of how to go into this, into these types of fields. And this is going to become an issue as we move back towards it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's if you talk to people who work in, for example, electrical utilities, or if you talk to people who work in various trades, you'll often hear this question: I don't know where the next generation is coming from. I don't know where the continuity is. I know of at least one major engineering college that shut down its power engineering program a few years ago for lack of interest, which is too bad, because my son was considering going there to study that. But, that sort of took that one off the table when we found out it had been shuttered. I guess I would say there is this discontinuity, and probably the form of manufacturing employment that we would look to see grow in the future would not precisely resemble the mass assembly line labor, I guess, media image or vibe that a lot of people have in their bones or just saw it on TV. It's not going to look like that, but it's going to look like something. And even in China, it doesn't look like that anymore. Not so much. There are sweatshops in China for sure. There are, people sitting at a sewing machine 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. But a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about Chinese advanced manufacturing, the kind of stuff we would like to make here, advanced batteries, weapon system components, to be sure, but also just something as simple as the BYD car. The things stopping us from making it here are usually not the quality of worker available. They're usually not even the technology, although there's some integration that we could be doing. It's as much as anything, folks, just capital systematic.
We're coming up on a quick break here. And I'd love if I can hold you over. So honored to have you on the program here today, because I think a big piece of this that we want to look at nationwide is China and what we can do to compete with China and hopefully, and I suspect we can, outcompete China. This is Jack Posobiec. You're listening to Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, and the Salem Radio Network. Right back. Quick break.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice News Break. I'm Terrence Bates. We appreciate you being here with us. It is more than 100 days into the Trump administration, and the president is now reshuffling his administration, specifically his closest advisors. He's moving National Security Advisor Mike Waltz from that position to the United Nations after nominating the former Florida congressman to be the next United States ambassador to the UN. For the time being, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as Waltz's interim replacement. This is going to mark the first time since the 1970s that one person will serve both as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. Both positions, by the way, are top administration assignments. Taking to Truth Social on Thursday, President Trump clearing up reports that Waltz was forced out of the White House following his part in the Signalgate controversy. Quote, from his time in uniform on the battlefield, in Congress, and as my national security advisor, Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first. I know he will do the same in his new role. Now to some economic news that's just in. The United States has added 177 jobs just from last month. It's a slight decrease from the month before, though. In fact, it's an increase from the 130,000 jobs that many economists had predicted, yet still a decline, as I said, from the previous month. The new numbers from the Labor Department of Labor Statistics, are among the first economic indicators since President Trump initiated his new tariff policies. The unemployment rate remains steady at 4.2%. Some industries, however, are already pulling back on expectations of widespread layoffs later this year. For instance, airlines are scaling back 2025 financial forecasts, citing uncertainty over spending on non-essential travel. Tariffs are being blamed for the move. That's a quick check of your headlines. As always, we appreciate you being along for the ride. We, of course, will have more headlines for you throughout the day and as we move into the weekend. In the meantime, keep it locked right here on Real America's Voice. For now, let's get you back to Human Events Daily.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back live. Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, Salem Radio Network, welcoming in the third hour, the Charlie Kirk Show. We're here live with FCC Commissioner Nate Symington. And Commissioner, just when we left before, we were talking about China and we were talking about capacity. One of the things, as a prior Navy intelligence officer, I think a lot about shipbuilding. I actually do. I spend a lot. It might be a kind of my nerdy hobby, but it is certainly something that I consider in terms of America's force projection, in terms of our ability to protect our merchant ships out on the open seas, and freedom of navigation around the world, an increasingly tumultuous world. Anyone can see what's going on in the Red Sea and the Houthis right now as pertains to that. And yet we've fallen so far behind the Chinese on shipbuilding to the point of where I believe Vice President Vance said that we've only built something like 3 major ships in an entirety of all last year. This is something that falls directly in line with what you're talking about, isn't it?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Imagine going back to the United States of 1930, 1950, 1970, and saying one day China is going to build half the ships in the world. Japan and South Korea are going to split much of the difference. Italy will have a piece, and the United States will have 0. But that's within, we build a few ships in the United States. There are some regulatory and other legal compliance reasons, but it's not the industry it used to be. The father of capitalism, Adam Smith, was identifying things that governments should be spending on, and one of his examples was the Navy, which makes sense for 18th century Britain. It seems funny to say that we're going to have military shipbuilding unless we have a comprehensive full stack of the associated civilian technologies and people with relevant civilian training to step in. It's very, very difficult to imagine a truly healthy Navy without some sort of strength in this area. And it's strange that, as you say, a Navy built to protect commerce internationally in an uncertain world, and there's still piracy. There's a movie about it. I'm the captain now. it's funny that in a world like this, the United States has less presence in this area than the international guarantor of the seas would be expected to have. I guess just to put a pin in this one, with the key, when I'm saying advanced technologies to build the Navy, we need a steel industry for this that is truly healthy and flourishing, but we also need an advanced manufacturing sector that's capable of meeting the kinds of price points and capabilities that can only be acquired by long-standing industrial engagement outside of the normal military contracting process. You know, I've heard from people working in this area that the South Koreans can do things in 2 days or a week that might take us 6 months or more to do. And they've developed that expertise painstakingly over time. And if the answer for us is that it's better to repair our ships there, well, that might be a good short-term answer. But as far as a long-term answer, it's obviously got to be development of American capability. Otherwise, we're not going to be up to our jobs of keeping the seas free.
And that's what it all comes down to, right? You know, you talk about these things, talk about Maersk, Alabama, right? We needed our ship to be able to perform that maneuver so that the Navy SEAL snipers from SEAL Team 6 could be able to get in place to deal with those Somalian pirates. And so, you know, it's one of these situations where, you know, these are old problems. These are actually, shipbuilding is one of the things that in many ways built the United States, even back when we were just the 13 colonies. These are not new industries at all. What's new is this idea through globalism that we didn't need these industries anymore, and that we could offshore them and then somehow just bring back the products here through the flow of capital. And it really isn't working. And this is why, for so many reasons, places like Plymouth, places like Portsmouth, places like Newport News, where so many incredible ships are built. This is why those areas have been built up so much, and there's so many jobs out there. Well, guess what? They're going to be lost, and those are going to be Groton up in Connecticut. I could just keep naming off places and areas where there's so much economic activity surrounding this, just from the military side, not to mention commercial. I'm from Philadelphia, by the way, where we've got effectively a mothballed shipyard that used to be one of the great job providers in the area. It was the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Commissioner, where can people go to track you? This was great. This was not what we planned on talking about at all, but sometimes it just works out that way. Where can people go to get more information from you?
Well, my @ is Symington FCC. So SIMINGTON FCC. And that's the same @ on Instagram, Twitter, and Truth Social. Just maybe one last closing comment on the ships. In Primary Colors, which came out in 91 or 92, the Clinton stand-in is already telling people in Portsmouth, you know, we're not going to be making ships anymore. The muscle jobs are going overseas, is I believe the phrase. So he's all but telling them learn to code. So this has been in the air for more than 30 years, and we've had plenty of lead time to deal with it. But you know, the first step is admitting it.
First step is admitting you have a problem. We'll be right back here, Human Events Daily.
Terrence Bates here with your Real America's Voice news break. We appreciate you being here with us. President Trump is back in Florida right now as the Sunshine State is becoming a shining example of local and state implementation of his border security and deportation efforts. A record 1,122 people accused of being in the country illegally were arrested this week in Florida. ICE is touting the arrests in this action-packed video that was posted online. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says his state's work with ICE and the Department of Homeland Security is showing that this really can be a well-oiled machine.
You hear a lot about due process. We have tens of thousands of illegal aliens in Florida at a minimum that have already been issued final orders of removal. And there's hundreds of thousands of them throughout the United States of America. So they've had a lot of process. They've been ordered to be removed. They have not complied with those removal orders. And that's a very, very high priority for our state efforts to continue to identify those individuals and make sure that they're returned to their country of origin.
U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement reportedly has 517 agreements in place across 21 states, allowing local police to make immigration arrests and detain people for immigration violations. Dozens of additional agreements are coming down the pike. President Trump is back at Mar-a-Lago, as I said, for a long weekend away from the White House. He actually made his way to Florida after addressing graduates here at the University of Alabama, whom he calls the first graduating class of this golden age of America. The president delivered the commencement address Thursday during a special event in advance of today's graduation ceremonies at Alabama. By the way, President Trump is set to address graduating cadets at the U.S. Military Academy during this graduation season. We'll, of course, be covering that for you as well here on Real America's Voice. Well, that's going to do it for your headlines. As always, we appreciate you being here with us here on Real America's Voice and on Human Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. Now, let's get you back to the show.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back live here, Washington, D.C. Another beautiful day in Washington, D.C. I'm glad it's good weather today because immediately after this, I'm going to a fun run, my kids, where they're going to throw paint on me, which be great. I'm really, really excited. I will be taking the jacket off for that. It's a fundraiser. I want to welcome in here the Salem Radio Network as well as the Real America's Voice audience and our next guest, the great Dr. Steve Turley. Dr. Turley, thanks so much for joining us back here on Human Events.
Oh, it's great to be back with you, Jack. Do I get to come and throw paint at you too?
You can come, but I've got to have my paintball gun there, so you better be ready.
Oh no! Oh, I'm gonna get it back. Oh, there you go. With my kind of courage,
I'll see some kids when I'm at Poso when I get the Tippmann A5 out. But Dr. Turley, I wanted to ask you, you know, what we've seen, and you and I were kind of tweeting the other day when Easter happened, that it seemed like from a variety of different signs that this Easter seemed like a bigger Easter. It's hard to say because Easter is always big. Of course, it's the biggest Christian, festival and holiday of the year, liturgically and theologically, of course. But there was more around this Easter. You saw the great King of Kings from Angel Studios, by the way, was breaking records at the box office. And then The Chosen was at the box office with like 3 other movies. I think there was another Christian-themed movie that was at the box office. Meanwhile, Snow White went down in flames. Snow woke. What is going on right now? And are we experiencing a Christian revival?
We are. In a nutshell, we are. It's pretty astonishing stuff. Scholars call it re-traditionalization, and it's really happening. We're seeing it in real time. I was following your X feed right around Easter weekend. You were on top of it all as usual. But yeah, I mean, the numbers don't lie. In France, there was a record-breaking 17,800 converts baptized across the country. This is 10,400 adult baptisms, 7,400 young people baptisms. This is between 11 and 17, all into the Catholic Church. And keep in mind, these are baptisms. So these are converts coming in. They've never been baptized before. 45% increase from this time last year in 2024. It wasn't just France, Belgium. Baptisms were up 50% from this time last year. In London, in the Catholic Archdiocese of Westminster, there were a record number 500 converts who were received into the church on Easter Vigil. That's a 24% increase from their previous highest, which was back in 2018. And this is, again, part of this stunning sort of surge, particularly in trad Catholic church membership in the UK. They're on course to surpass, and I bet you know this, Jack, they're on course to surpass the Anglican church membership for the first time since Henry VIII. Since the founding of the Anglican Church. And we saw some comparable numbers here in the United States. St. Patrick's. Yeah. It's stunning. 350 people were baptized.
Wait, does that mean, by the way, wait, Dr. Turley, I have to ask, does that mean we get all our abbeys and monasteries and churches back that the king and the crown confiscated from the Catholic Church? I think I'll have to wait on that one, I suppose.
Well, bring your paintball gun. You may be able to get it, I think. Yeah. No, it's amazing stuff. I have to tell you, because what's going on here is just par for the course of what's happening all over the world. Scholars such as Rodney Stark of Baylor University, who just passed away a couple of years, he was calling it, what he was noticing over the last decade, the single greatest religious revival in the world we've actually ever seen. And it is turning the world more and more politically conservative. And it's this process known as retraditionalization, where more and more populations are pushing back against liberal globalism, against wokeness, by re-embracing nation, culture, custom, and tradition, most particularly their religious traditions, as mechanisms of resistance against the anti-cultural processes of liberal globalism and its secular aristocracy. And they're embracing, what's so cool about it, Jack, is they're embracing like real kind of classical traditionalist Christianity. They're attracted to the Latin Mass. We're seeing in my communion, the Orthodox communion, we've seen an 80% increase in converts since 2022, which was the highest number recorded post-pandemic. And, you know, you and I were talking about this in Austin. It's being driven primarily by young men. Young men, more than anyone else, are coming into the church. Actually, for the very first time, we're finding that young men's faith commitment is larger than women's. So this was based on an American Enterprise Institute study of Gen Zers, 5,000 of them. So these are people born between 1997 and 2012. And in that survey, they asked you identify as religious or non-religious. About 40% of the women there described themselves as non-religious, but only about 30% of the men describe themselves as non-religious. That's unheard of. We've never seen that before. Researchers always find men more non-religious than women. Always. Any age cohort, you name it. Not with Gen Z. Gen Z looks like it's not just the most religious demographic that we have in terms of age. It may actually be the one representing where the men are returning, and they're turning to faith.
And this is amazing. And by the way, I'll say this with we see it at the Catholic Church, where if you go to churches now, it started in the Latin Rite churches, but now it's moved over even into the Novus Ordo. That's the ones that you'll see in English for those out there trying to follow up with all of our liturgical talk.
Your Latin, yeah, that's right.
That you will see the veils. The veils are coming back, and what's so interesting to me is that you see the veils coming back with women who are sort of, over 60, but also the women under 30. The women under 30 are coming in veils. And you're seeing they will kneel, but full kneel before they go for communion, and kneel and no communion on the hand, actually communion in on the tongue. And what does that mean? That, basically that is the more traditional way. I am not worthy. This is the body of Christ. And again, these are these outward implements that we can all see to realize that what's going on is, and I think, and I'll ask your take on it as well, but I imagine it's similar, that what's going on is that we've lived in such a secular, atheistic world. It's like, guys, the atheists, you've had your shot. You had your shot, and it completely failed. I said it yesterday on the program. COVID was your shining moment in the mud, and people realize that we can't go on like this anymore, and so they're grasping for some sort of traditional meaning. They want to snap all the way back as far as they can go, and that's why they're going back where? To the most traditional forms of worship that we have available, those available in the traditional rites of the Catholic Church and in the Orthodox Church. That's why they're looking for that. They don't want the woke modernist, kind of stuff. I mean, and I was at that
contemporary
prayer service with the female bishop that President Trump and JD Vance, and she starts yelling at them and go. I was sitting a couple pews behind them with my brother, and just. She's going off about illegal aliens and you shouldn't do that. Everyone's kind of looking at each other like, what did we get ourselves into? And pull their tax exempt status along with Harvard's, by the way. But do you think that's what it is? Are people searching for meaning and they want the fullest meaning they can find?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, what you found yourself in is something called Episcopalianism, and
yes,
you should listen to Tucker talk about it. Being an Episcopalian, it's quite the fun stories there. I think you're absolutely right. There's a theorist, a cyclical theorist, very much like Fourth Turning, but at a bigger like civilizational level, by the name of Petirim Sorokin. He's the American-Russian sociologist. He founded the sociology department at Harvard back in the 1930s. And that's his, you pretty much summed up his argument. His argument in a nutshell is that all civilization is rooted in religion, classic ancient religion. All civilization is rooted in religion because religion provides those sacred frames of reference that give constant renewal to society. Society is always breaking down in some way, shape, or form. It needs to find sort of like a fountain of youth to constantly rejuvenate itself. And that's what religion traditionally provided. And then he recognized that every society has a secular element to it. You got to learn you got to mow the lawn, you got to do your accounting, you got to cook the meals and blah, blah, blah. So he just saw the secular as just the mundane, everyday sort of stuff. But the secular was always, in some way, shape, or form, an embodiment of the sacred, of the eternal, of the religious. He theorized that virtually every society at some point goes on a prodigal journey where the secular sort of breaks off from the sacred and says, I got this, I don't need you no more, kind of thing. So it breaks off from the sacred and tries to do its own thing for a while. But it inevitably ends up collapsing because it doesn't have those eternal sources of renewal that you get only with the religious sacred. So it ends up inevitably collapsing. I love how you said it, like in the sense of COVID in many ways, I think it was the most stark moment where we recognize, is this what we signed up for? The sterile, ugly, sort of tyrannical, despotic nonsense? Is this what so it starts to rot. But what Sorokin, this is the cyclical part, pointed out, Sorokin noted that rot actually turned more into a compost. And then the religious seeds are still there to blossom again. And they're still there because they really are eternal. They really are an eternal point of renewal. We may leave them, these eternal seeds, but it doesn't leave us. And so when we rot, when we come back on our prodigal journey, all of a sudden you'll inevitably see another springtide of religious renewal. It's a beautiful cyclical picture.
This is why, by the way, that when the communists come to power in any country, anywhere, and the revolutionaries, what's the first group they go after? Well, they try to root out those seeds. That's exactly who they target, because they realize that there cannot be a competing religion to their religion. And so what do? They target the priests, they target the nuns, they target the clergy. And we saw this from Spain to Russia to France to China, and even the religious there, the monks. and they wipe them out completely until, or in some cases, they are stopped. By the way, happy Franco Friday. This is Jack Posobiec. You're listening to Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, and Salem Radio Network. Along with Dr. Steve Turley. We'll be right back.
Now, a remarkable shift happening in American public life. Ever since the baby boomer generation, surveys have shown women are more religious than men, but not anymore. Two new surveys show Gen Z men are more likely to claim religious affiliation and even attend church than their female counterparts. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent and NBC News Now daily anchor Morgan Radford for a closer look at this trend and what it means, even politically, Morgan.
Mika, great question. It has a lot of political implications, especially if you sort of look down in the decades to come. But it's a trend that America's religious leaders have been paying attention to, but it's also something that a growing number of political groups are tracking, since this shift toward religion is happening at the very same time that we're also seeing more young men lean conservative on a number of social issues.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec here. We are back live for the third hour of the Charlie Kirk Show on the Salem Radio Network, as well as Real America's Voice, Human Events Daily. We're on with Dr. Steve Turley, the host of Turley Talks and the author of Fight. The new book, you should go and get it and check it out. It explains so much about what's going on right now and what you can do about it. And we're talking about this religious revival. And, you know, we were just talking in the last segment about how this is also, by the way, coming up in political results. You see it in election results. There's this election in Canada that, yes, it went to the Liberals. But when you break it out by age, guess what? It's only the 55 plus that voted for the Liberals. Every other age demographic under 55 voted for the Conservatives. This is a complete inversion of what we thought would happen with politics. And so what is it? Do you believe that this is also something that's driving this, Dr. Turley?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm laughing because we were talking before the break. There's a large book, it's about 400 pages, 2 British authors, called The Cultural Backlash. And it's been widely known as the Cultural Backlash thesis. I think it was published in 2018, 2019. And it basically made the argument that, yeah, Trump has won. This is back in 2016. Yeah, we're seeing the nationalist populace rise all over Europe. Yeah. But don't worry. Those are just a bunch of old white men who are threatened by this new, beautiful multicultural progressivism that's awakening all around them. And they're just doing their Archie Bunker thing, but they're all going to die out. And within 10 years or so, this world is going to be this happy, clappy, woke place. And the reason why that is so absurd is because it's the exact opposite in the end. It's actually the boomers. Sorry, Xers aren't that much better per se. I'm an Xer technically, but really the boomers are kind of they're the hangover, as it were. They're the lag of an old world, a liberal, industrial, modernist world that really came to the fore in 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union. And then we became kind of the unipolar. We became a unipolar world with the United States at the head and kind of neocon philosophy saying we basically rule the world. We rule it politically. We rule it economically. We rule it militarily. And that world, that concept of just these structures, the WTO and the IMF, managing world order, the rules-based order, where you put all this trust in those institutions and in universities and science because they're all rational and objective. That world is dead. I mean, it is dead in the hearts, certainly in the hearts and minds of people under the age, I would say, of 50. And it still lives on. There is the lag. It's still there, no question. But I think politically, it's really only living in the memories of voters who are probably 60 and up, who still have a lot of trust in those institutions, who still believe, when they're hearing things from the CDC or the WHO, I better listen to that kind of stuff. They still believe in that. And they see the new nationalist populist movements around the world as fascist and Nazi and dangerous and, white supremacists and Christian nationalists and so forth. And when in point of fact, all it is, it's another world that's rising. It's another world order that's rising. What is it? Nation, culture, custom, tradition. It's civilizationalism. So it's a world where civilization is rising together with the ancient religions so as to create a new world that is far more conservative, but I would argue as well, far more free because it breaks through those managerial institutions that function as a one-size-fits-all top-down rule.
That's an incredible way of looking at it. The rise and the return, perhaps, of Western civilization, because we see Eastern civilization being absolutely resurgent right now on the world stage. You see it with Russia, which, of course, is an ancient civilization. You see it with India. You see it with China. Certainly, these have been around for thousands of years. So who are we as the West? And I think we've been sort of going through this national and civilizational question for quite some time. And, it's making us question some of the shibboleths and the taboos and the values that we've been holding up over the last 30 years, and realizing that perhaps that was a singular moment in global history that's never going to come back again. And so we have to remember who we are. Dr. Turley, we're all out of time. Where can people go to follow you and get the book?
Oh, you can just punch my name, Dr. Steve Turley, into YouTube or Rumble. You'll find my channel there, and just go to Amazon to grab the book, Fight: How Trump and the MAGA Movement Are Changing the World.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro.
Steve Bannon.
Now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
This is America's Voice Live.
And welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gertler.
The pulse of the people.
We need somebody that's going to hear the people's voice.
The truth the mainstream won't touch.
This guy is by definition a globalist. Rav's own Ben Bergquam.
Right up over this hill, we got an cartel. I see him.
Live.
Breaking news right now here on Real America's Voice.
Unfiltered.
These people are domestic terrorists.
And unapologetic.
We're here to take a stand for God and country. Let's feel good, doesn't it?
America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gurr. It's Friday, thankfully, April the 2nd. Let's get to the day's top stories. Thank you, as always, for tuning in with us here on Real America's Voice. We truly appreciate it. Now, just this week, the Senate Commerce Committee decided to advance President Trump's nomination of Jared Isaacman as NASA's new administrator. Isaacman will now face the Senate for a final confirmation of that position. It's almost for sure. More on that coming up. Also, just last night, President Trump signed an executive order to cut federal funding for both NPR and PBS because of their efforts to spread woke anti-American propaganda. And I say, well, it's about damn time. We'll be discussing that coming up. And then later, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. working hard to make America healthy again. He recently stated that he will ban 8 harmful food dyes by the end of next year. All those details straight ahead as well. But first, I'd like to start here today. The jobs report is out. Last month's job report was released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics earlier today. And it seems that the economy is responding quite well to President Trump's policies, despite predictions of doom and gloom from the left and tariff-related slowdowns. The Department of Labor reporting that employers added 177,000 new jobs in April alone, a number that far surpassed what economists, the so-called experts, had predicted for the month. Now, in March, the month before, 185,000 new jobs were added in total. The unemployment has remained unchanged from a month ago, remaining at 4.2%, very close to historic lows. Look, 4.2% is a good unemployment number. Make no mistake about it. Shortly after the report was released, President Trump took to Truth Social and stated this: gasoline just broke $1.98 a gallon, lowest in years. Groceries and eggs down, energy down, mortgage rates down, employment strong, and much more good news as billions of dollars pour in from tariffs. Just like I said, and we're only in a transition stage, just getting started. The point of it all is that President Trump's policies appear to be working. We're only in a transition stage, and we're seeing great numbers like these. Here with me to discuss this in detail, the director of the Center for the Federal Budget at the Heritage Foundation, Richard Stern. Richard, one thing I need to correct one thing. Most of what I heard there is accurate, but gas is not $1.98 a gallon. I hate to tell the president that. The cheapest I find, look, it's a good price. It's $2.66. That's the state of Mississippi, according to AAA. But look, the jobs report is good. The unemployment number at 4.2%. We were always taught in school that 4% is basically full employment, so a good number there. Inflation, 2.4% overall. Richard, how would you grade the economy right now as we stand here today?
Oh, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's doing well. It's showing signs of growth. And by the way, as good as those job numbers look, the other thing that's in the report is that federal employment is down. Yes, DOGE is doing its job in getting rid of those federal bureaucrats that do nothing and steal your taxpayer dollars to do it. And so private sector growth is even more robust than the total job number gives you. And I think you're right. We saw a massive uptick in business investment in the GDP numbers that came. Business optimism is getting better. People are unshaky about the tariffs, but the underlying structure of the economy is doing very well.
So that's interesting. The jobs number is up 177,000, but federal jobs have been being eliminated. So if that hadn't happened, what would we look like today?
Oh, so it would have been in the high 180s. And of course, you got to keep in mind that there's also state government jobs. And then the other side of that is that, we know the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been wrong for years in a row now. And so we'll have to see what the revisions are that come in. I'm sure it'll be better than expected by the time we get done with everything. And, the other side of it also is when you go under the hood and look at this, a lot of the jobs in the Biden years were government subsidized jobs. And what you find in this one is there's more jobs that are in things that people actually use. There are more transportation and warehousing jobs, for example, which is a good leading indicator that there's more business activity going on.
Sure.
And that matches the GDP numbers we saw as well.
Let me ask you about this. Here's the truth in reporting question for today. We're going to go back about 10 days, maybe 14 days in time. And you saw all of these big outlets, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC, CBS, ABC, all of them. It's going to be the worst April since 1932. It's doom and gloom, the Trump. It was all nonsense. I'm looking at the markets here today. Up over 500 points is the Dow. That's 1.25%. The NASDAQ up 1.5%, over 18,000, and the S&P also up. All the doom and gloom about the markets is not panning out either. It looks like the markets have stabilized quite nicely and are starting to climb again.
Oh, absolutely. So I think part of this, again, is the media outlets are always shakier than the market is. Of course, they don't actually produce real products and employ people for the most part. But, they were upset about the tariffs. And to be fair, the tariffs could be scary. But I think we now understand that the president's policy is for them to be temporary, for them to be a negotiation tool to get real wins out of other countries. A lot of the media thought that China was going to win the trade war. The Chinese are now begging Trump to cut a deal with them. So, I think that's why the markets rebounded, is they understand the strategy of the tariffs. They understand that Trump is trying to get real wins for the country. And they understand that, frankly, the Chinese are panicking a lot more than our businesses are panicking. All of that is cause for renewed optimism. But, that's what you're looking at. And, of course, as well as I do, the legacy media looks for every opportunity they can to try to demonize Trump and scare people about him.
Yeah, absolutely true. Let's talk about China for just a moment here, because it's an important point that you've made here. Look, China claims that their economy is growing 5%. That's simply not true. In fact, many would say they believe that China's economy is in decline, in a real recession already. And so then, Richard, the question comes, how long can China hold out? So a little light broke through today, potentially, in conversations over fentanyl in China, saying, look, we'll work on the fentanyl problem. So that has come to light. I'm sure you're aware of that. That could provide the opening for China and the Chinese Communist Party to begin negotiations without losing face, which is so important for folks in the CCP. They have to look like they stood their ground. But if they start conversations about fentanyl and it leads somewhere else, all the better. And so here's my question. If that happens, if we get a deal with China, we get a deal with the EU, we put a deal together with Canada, Mexico, and the 7 big major trading partners, within a few weeks, the American economy could really be going great guns, couldn't it?
Oh, definitely. And keep in mind that you're repairing all of that across the board and across the world with domestic attempts by DOGE to cut regulations, to get rid of bureaucrats that just spend their day trying to strangle American businesses. Right now, for an average small manufacturer in the U.S., the regulatory cost per worker is $50,000 per year. So, as DOGE and the president go ahead trying to get rid of regulations, that will also jumpstart the economy. And then you're absolutely right. As we bring China, the EU, these other countries to the table, as they get rid of their trade barriers and actually engage with us in a real fashion, it opens up markets for American producers. It makes sure that we're playing on a level playing field. One of the other problems, of course, is the Chinese government is dumping these products like EVs into our market and the European markets with the expressed goal of destroying critical industries that they deem to be a military advantage to us. So, getting them to end those practices is good economics. It's also important for our national security.
They've always done that, Richard. I don't have to look any farther than antibiotics. The Chinese bought up all the antibiotic factories around the world, and in 2004 dropped the price through the floor. The last American antibiotic facility was in New York State. It went bankrupt as a result. We don't have one now. China plays dirty like this. It's part and parcel to what they do, and it's why it has to be stopped. It's one of the reasons I applaud President Trump for saying, look, we need to reset the way these things work. Do you think it's working, Richard? Do you think that we're making progress, not just with China, but with our other trading partners?
I do. It's hard to know exactly until we start getting deals inked and signed and everything. But at the same time, I think what we're hearing is the light that you were talking about coming out of the negotiations with China. You're seeing that across the board with a lot of countries. One of the things I think is an interesting side note on this is, obviously, China has gotten around a lot of these restrictions for years by sending products to Europe, to South Korea, to Japan, and Vietnam, and then sending them on to the U.S. South Korea actually has started really coming down, bearing down on these Chinese goods effectively being smuggled through South Korea, starting to really follow the law on that. That's the first time South Korea has ever done that. You're seeing that out of a lot of EU countries as well. And so that, to me, right, is this unprecedented step where these countries are finally playing ball with us with how they're handling China. And that's an unprecedented move towards these countries choosing the U.S. over China and over the ambivalence that they've had just sitting on the fence in the middle. So I think the sky's the limit for how good this could be.
Let me look at one more area, one more sector of the economy, Richard, which I think is critical. Maybe it is the most critical section, and that is energy, of course. And this president came out with energy policies from day one, declared an energy emergency, and has continued to follow that path. As a result, a lot of things have happened. Today, West Texas Intermediate crude is at $58 a barrel. That means that energy is cheaper. Gasoline may fluctuate some, but energy is cheaper. And so when you look at the inflation rate being at 2.4%, I would anticipate, not being an expert like you, but I would anticipate, being an observer, that inflation would continue to come down a click here and a click there, which would mean that Jerome Powell and the Fed, they're going to be forced, they're almost going to have no choice but to bring interest rates down. Again, another thing that can stimulate the economy in this country, and I look forward to it. Will he do it? Jerome Powell pretends to be non-political. We know that's not exactly true. What do you anticipate?
So, yeah, I think the important thing to recognize about the Fed, and you brought it up right there, is that it pretends to be independent. We all know it's deeply political. Look, Biden passed bill after bill that ratcheted up government spending, which if the Fed had not printed cash, would have looked bad on day one, and Congress may not have voted for those bills. But Powell signaled to markets, signaled to the president and the Congress that he would print the money out of thin air at the Fed, devaluing all the dollars in your bank account and in your paycheck to finance Biden's inflationary agenda. The moment that Trump asked him to lower rates to smooth over his tariff negotiations, Powell told the president to go pound sand. Now, I'm not saying the Fed should have done either of those, but it should be consistent about that. And the only thing that's consistent about Powell is that he helps the liberals. And that's part of the problem here about this. But I agree with you. The more energy we have, the lower prices are for all Americans, the faster economic growth will be for everybody.
Look into your crystal ball, Richard. This will be the last thing. Just give me your forecast 3, 6, 9 months out. Not long term, but mid-range out by late this year, early next year. Where do you think we're going to be?
I think we're probably going to have unemployment come down a little bit, not 3 months, but 6 to 9 months. I think it might come back down to about 4 points. I think you're going to have job growth that's over 200,000 a month, probably. And I think you're going to continue to see an uptick in business investment. But I would say more 6 to 9 months. But what I'm anticipating is over the next couple months, we're going to iron out the rest of these trade deals. I think 3 months from now, you're going to go back to having no tariffs because we're going to have these deals together. And if that's the environment, along with the spending cuts, along with the deregulation, I think 6 to 9 months from now, you're going to be having all these really great economic stats, stock market up, business optimism up. But I will warn, if the deals aren't done and the tariffs are still there more than 3 months from now, things start to get uneasy again. But we'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's a crystal ball. And, of course, things happen that we cannot predict, natural disasters, things of that nature. But I am optimistic. It sounds like you are as well. Richard, thank you for being here. Richard Stern from the Heritage Foundation. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right, up after the break. That is good news, by the way. After the break, President Trump's pick to lead NASA in his second term is now very close to becoming the agency's 15th administrator after a Senate committee advanced the nomination of Jared Isaacman. We'll talk about that coming up on America's Voice Live, Friday edition. Commerce Committee decided to advance President Trump's nomination of Jared Isaacman to be NASA's 15th administrator. The vote was 19-9. During his confirmation hearing earlier this month, senators questioned Isaacman on his visions for NASA as they pertain to climate research, planetary science funding, and the Artemis program, and his private relationship with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. With the vote to secure his position as NASA's administrator on an imminent path, Isaacman stands to replace former administrator Bill Nelson and take the reins from the current acting administrator. And considering the blunder of leaving astronauts stranded in space for, 9 months? I'd say maybe it's time for someone else to step into that position. Here with me to discuss it is the CEO of United Spaceports, that is, Corporation, Rob Lauer. Rob, nice to see you here today.
Thanks for having me on.
Tell me, what do you think about Mr. Isaacman? Is he the right person for the job at this time when we're, reinitializing the American space program in earnest?
One thing we can say about the Trump administration and Trump's approach to people and focusing on who to hire, putting together a team, is he's been reaching out to successful entrepreneurs like Jared. He's going after people who have real-world experience, who are entrepreneurs, who are wealthy, successful people in their own industries, who frankly don't need this position. Jared doesn't need this position. He's doing it because he wants to serve. And that's a lot. I think that's a pattern we're seeing in this administration, is people who are coming to this industry, from the private sector, who understand what it takes to build a business, to build a company, and deal with government. Frankly, that's a big, huge problem. That's always front and center for any entrepreneur, is dealing with government regulations and bureaucracy. Bureaucrats have no sense of urgency to get things done. They don't care about budgets or being on time. They don't care. Entrepreneurs absolutely must have a sense of urgency to get things done, work on a budget. And we saw that, frankly, with SpaceX and with Elon Musk, who put in his own money, $100 million of his own money, to create SpaceX. And if that failed, no one would know who he is today, frankly. He would be a laughingstock. Right. But because he took the chance and had that sense of urgency, and the first 3 rockets, as we all know, failed, and that 4th rocket, had that failed, SpaceX wouldn't be around today. So what we're learning is, and what we've always known is, in politics and government, people are policy. And you have to have the right people to move the...
Yeah, let me ask you this, because talking about SpaceX, and I just want to jump in there because it's really important. Elon Musk, obviously on the forefront, wants to plant the American flag on Mars. It seems to me, as an observer here, and not somebody involved with the space program, sitting here and observing the American space program, it looked like it was DOA until Elon Musk came along. It seems like he has revived the American space program almost single-handedly. So his relationship with Mr. Isaacman, I think, would be a benefit, not a detriment. But apparently some senators didn't see that way. But do you agree with me? Did Elon Musk and SpaceX
I agree with you 100%,
resurrect the American space program?
Let's go further. What we've seen is, in the last 4 years, and frankly before that, is the politicization of the NASA. Climate change. Those are not the mission. That's not the mission of NASA. NASA's mission is to put people and satellites and technology in space, on the moon and on Mars, and further expand human liberty and human exploration around the solar system. And climate change and all this DEI stuff is a distraction. It should not be the mission. It's not the mission. So what we have are people who are focused on the mission. Like I said, Jared doesn't need this. He's rich. He's successful. He's been an astronaut. He's a fighter pilot. He's done all these things, by the way, with his own money, not with government money. So he's done these things and understands what it takes, and he's excited to further the human experience in space. He's not just a bureaucrat who, for most people, this position in NASA would be a step up. For him and a lot of the people who Trump are bringing in, these are steps down. These are people who are coming to the government and foregoing a lot of money and a lot of prestige that they normally have, and instead they're sacrificing to serve our country.
Yeah, absolutely sacrifice. And that's true of a lot of folks that are in the administration right now. You look at a whole host of folks that are there. And as you put it, wealthy, successful people that have proven themselves in the private sector, now lending that expertise and that ability to move America forward. I mean, that should be applauded, shouldn't it?
Well, I can just tell you, as a self-employed entrepreneur all my life, my number one obstacle is government. Number one obstacle, hassle, harassment, money issue is always government. And I'll give you an example. We filed an application with the FAA. This is about a year and a half ago, before Trump came in. And it was a 2-page double-spaced application for a project. And the FAA itself said it should take 3 hours to review and approve. It took the FAA 7 months to approve a 2-page application. So the problem we have is government and bureaucracy and bureaucrats have no sense of urgency to get things done. Entrepreneurs like Jared and Elon Musk, myself, they have a sense of urgency to get things done. We want to get this done in our lifetime. We don't want to put it off. This is not for Jared a gig to further his own career. That it's not a step up. These people are there to get things done.
Yeah. Last quick question, Rob. And speaking of our lifetimes, you and I are not 21 years of age. I can go ahead and make that wager. Will we see the American flag on Mars in our lifetime? Is it possible? Is it likely?
Only if the government gets out of our way and lets people like Elon Musk do what they do best.
Well, I appreciate that. From United Spaceports Corporation, Rob Lauer. Good conversation, Rob. I hope we do plant the American flag on Mars. I think that would be an inspiration to people, not just in America, but around the world. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right. Coming up after the break, just last night, President Trump signed an executive order to cut federal funding for both NPR and PBS for their part in spreading woke anti-American propaganda. More details coming up straight ahead. Late yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order to cut taxpayer funds to both PBS and NPR. For what? for spreading radical, woke, anti-American propaganda, he says. The order instructs the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and other federal agencies to cease federal funding for both companies. Further requires that they work to root out indirect sources of public financing for the news organizations. The two broadcasting companies get roughly $500 million in taxpayer money through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting in order to spread their woke ideology and agenda. But things are changing with President Trump in office. No surprise. Here with me to discuss this is Real America's Voice Chief White House Correspondent Brian Glenn, who's happy to take any handouts he might get today. After all, it's Friday. Hello, Brian.
Maybe it's Free Beer Friday, and maybe the government or NPR and PBS can push that out too.
Couple of things about this. No surprise. Lawsuits are flying. Accusations are flying. And they're mad as hell. But the fact of the matter is, as we talked about in the break just before we came on, this only counts for like 10% of their funding. They have 90% of their budget. Do you think that all the television and radio stations that took it on the chin during COVID, and some lost 75% of their sales, there it is. Those people survived, but these guys are going to sit there on their ivory tower and wag their finger because they're not getting more taxpayer support? I bet all those companies would like some money, wouldn't they, Brian?
They would, Steve. They would. Matter of fact, they get about 15 to 16% of their total budget comes from the federal government, about $535 million a year from that. And to think that they're claiming that this violates any type of, First Amendment right. Well, I don't remember the founding fathers, saying that public taxpayer money must go to broadcast companies. Because if that's the fact, why don't Nexstar, Sinclair, Gray Television, and others just go ahead and line up, go to Washington, D.C., and try to get all this federal money that supposedly is your constitutional right? Look, at the end of the day, Steve, if you want to turn on PBS, you want to turn on NPR in the car, which is great, you can do that. You're still going to get your programming. It's just not going to come from federal taxpayer dollars. That's it. We're not telling Big Bird to go find a different nest. We're not putting the Cookie Monster back in the jar. We're not putting Oscar the Grouch back in the trash can. Those guys still exist, but that's what the left wants you to think, that for some reason we're wiping it away. We're just not using taxpayer dollars, and this is hugely popular with the people. Steve, you know this.
It is. People wanted to defund these two outlets for years. It's something that's been discussed for my entire professional career. It's been floating around anyway. Yeah. Look, I just had to go back to an old email. I went back to an old email I found. Town Square Media owns 220, 230 radio stations in this country. Their revenue in 21-22 was down 80%. Because of COVID regulations and shutdowns and lockdown. 80%. You know how much NPR and PBS were down? 0. Because they take money from the government and they have these other, nonprofits funding them every step of the way so they can continue to proliferate this left-wing agenda. While companies are out there competing in the free market, they skated right through it. And so I think that's what they're afraid of, Brian. They're afraid of having to compete on an even playing field.
You're absolutely correct. And that subcommittee on DOGE, where Marjorie Taylor Greene chaired that committee, brought the CEOs back in front of that panel, and they really exposed the bias in the media coverage. They can't sit there for 2 minutes and try to convince the American people that they're an unbiased news organization when you and I both know that's not the facts. Matter of fact, I have a very good friend that worked in a major market for PBS. It's a big city stuff. Years of experience in television. The day after that DOGE subcommittee hearing about the funding, she was fired. She was released from her job, and I was told that on a daily basis, President Trump was the punching bag. Marjorie Taylor Greene was public enemy number one. They simply do not like conservatives. They do not like President. They don't like you. They don't like me. But guess what? Here's a newsflash for you. We don't care. Steve Gruber doesn't care, and Brian Glenn certainly cares. And guess what? The American people say, you can hate us, but not on our dime.
But I don't understand, Brian. How can anybody not like you and I? I don't get that. I'm confused.
I don't know.
We're two lovable guys.
What is there not to like about Steve Gruber and myself? What is there not to like about us on a Friday afternoon?
And by the way, again, a Friday afternoon, and Brian's going to be offering Free Beer Friday for everybody in the D.C. area just tracking down. Brian, greatly appreciate you, my friend. Yeah,
thank you.
Greatly appreciate you.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. All right. This July, by the way, speaking of the summer and everything that's going on, there's a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio. The bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, are meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency, reserve currency as they call it. And they're also calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, global demand for the U.S. dollar could certainly decrease, bringing down the value of the dollars in your accounts, in your savings accounts specifically. While this transition won't happen overnight, the Rio Reset in July marks a pivotal moment when BRICS objectives move decisively from the theoretical toward reality. Learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free information kit on gold by texting America to 989898. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of satisfied customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation information kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text America to 989898 today. You know, if you've been prepared before Liberation Day, you might have been able to cash in on gold too. Don't miss your chance. Coming up after the break, I'll take a look at Health and Human Services Secretary Kennedy's efforts on banning food dyes from big box food brands and why the proposal is vital for Americans and their good health. Details coming up. Services Secretary Bobby Kennedy announcing his continued efforts to ban at least 8 petroleum-based food dyes. That's right, made out of oil. Who wants to eat oil? The dyes on this list include Red 40 along with Citrus number 3, to name some. This effort by RFK Jr. is to fulfill the promise of the Make America Healthy Again movement, where is Kennedy is seeking to drive down the prevalence of chronic disease. Additionally, preliminary studies show that besides being unhealthy, the consumption of these dyes could be linked to hyperactivity in children, driving up the prevalence of ADHD, for example. Therefore, prescription medications like Adderall get sold faster. You see how this vicious cycle works. Here now to discuss this is TP USA contributor, one of my favorites, Anthony Watson. Anthony, happy Friday to you. Look, I don't get it. So I don't eat seaweed, but apparently people in my family do. I find it odd. I'm just going to tell you that. But here's the seaweed package. It's supposed to be the healthiest thing you could possibly eat. This is a couple weeks ago. My wife flips it over. It's green. It's got green dye in it. I guess your seaweed isn't attractive enough all by itself. You got to put green dye on it. And when you start consuming this stuff, I mean, I don't know what they're putting on our bodies. I'm totally with Bobby Kennedy on this. What say you?
I'm totally with Bobby Kennedy on this as well. For the longest time, everyone on the conservative side has been saying that there's a health crisis that's now pushing the promotion of big pharma, because every single time you see a health crisis, every single time you see any kind of new disease, every single time you see something chronic, guess who's right there? The government, with all of their big pharmaceutical companies and checks that now have a miraculous and ready to go drug to now combat these things that now get people hooked and weaken their immune systems. And so what we're starting to see now is that now we're finally starting to take our health back and actually do it to produce longevity in the citizens of America. Because if that doesn't get anyone's attention, you look at every other country around the world. You look at Europe, you look at Asia, you look at even countries beneath us and South America that look at a lot of the snacks and the things that we produce and put on our shelves for regular and everyday consumption. They don't sell them there because of the health risks that they cause. And so now by taking control of this, it's now a way for us to step in the right direction to actually give people the health that they need to actually continue living in the lives that they want for themselves.
In fact, if they do sell things, Fruit Loops is one of the easy things to point out. Fruit Loops in the EU and elsewhere are not the same Fruit Loops you get in America, because they don't have those colors. They have, organic-based colors from vegetables and fruits and so forth. We have petroleum, apparently, which seems very odd to me. Whoever thought, hey, let's eat the oil. The point that I'm getting at is highly processed foods. Maybe it contributes to ADHD. Maybe it contributes to other illnesses. We need to clean up our act. More farm-to-table experience would be a lot healthier, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why you're starting to see families across the country now go to raw milks and raw eggs. They're starting to now purchase those things where now farmers make it available for you to purchase cattle that you can now have butchered and last you an entire year for your family and everybody else that can invest in those kinds of things. It's a harder thing to do because things that are now produced at such a mass quantity so poorly, it's the kind of the thing, do you want quality over quantity? And the quantity that we pumped out for the past couple of decades has been easy to make, but at what expense? At people's health and at people's livelihoods. And so now you're starting to see a shift of people that actually want to start taking control of their health to actually give them the chance at the life that they actually desperately want to live for.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I'm a chicken rancher for that very reason. We go out and collect eggs every day. People are doing what they can. A lot of these cities now allow you to have 3 or 4 or 5 hens, laying hens. Look, anything you can do to make your health better, I think people should do. You've got to get away from all this box nonsense. But something else we really need to do, Anthony, we need to make sure that some of these places like big urban areas, big cities, they need access to fresh food and fresh fruits and vegetables as well, because they don't have it as much. They get all their stuff as prepackaged box nonsense. We need to do a better job. We've got the farmers and the farms to do it. I think we can do better in that arena. What do you think?
I definitely think that we can do better. And I will say, for as messed up as we've been, we're on the right track to getting better, because nobody really knows what's better for them until they try it. And now a lot of these big corporations are now working extra hard to keep all of the good stuff out, because now all of the processed stuff has been their moneymaker for all these years, where they didn't even have to look at the machines. They didn't have to look at the stores to see how stocked they were, because everything was just coming in so regularly. But with the demand of everybody wanting better things for themselves, I think it's time that people and government and conglomerates and corporations actually listen to the people that are making these requests, because everything is made and always promoted to be like, oh, we're doing this for you, we're doing it for convenience, we're doing it just to make it easier for you. But anything that's worth having in life is always going to come with a little bit of a struggle intentionally to see how much it's worth it to you. And a lot of people now have to ask themselves the question, how much does their health mean to them? How much does their livelihood mean to them? How much does their familyhood mean to them? Because all of those things that they now consume and put in their body are now either adding to the longevity or taking away from it.
That's right. Anthony, you asked me about how things are in the D. Let me tell you this, in Detroit, Michigan, there are plenty of areas now where they've turned it into local co-ops and farms and turned what were, empty lots into places to grow food. Efforts are underway. We're getting there, but there's more work to be done. Anthony, thank you for being here as always.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. Have a good weekend.
You too, my friend. All right, after the break, I'll be discussing Mike Waltz and his new nomination by President Trump to be the ambassador to the United Nations. Is it a promotion? I think so. Some don't see it that way. We'll discuss it after the break. Thursday, President Trump nominated Mike Waltz to be his administration's ambassador to the United Nations. It came just hours after Waltz stepped down from his role as the National Security Advisor. Democrats currently trying to create a false narrative that his removal as NSA was, quote, due to the Signalgate leak. However, J.D. Vance recently denied those allegations and called Waltz's UN ambassador nomination a promotion. The vice president also said that Waltz has the trust of both himself and President Trump. See for yourself.
So it wasn't let go. He is being made ambassador to the United Nations, which, of course, is a Senate-confirmed position. I think you can make a good argument that it's a promotion. But we brought Mike on to do some serious reforms of the National Security Council. He has done that. I like Mike. I think he's a great guy. He's got the trust of both me and the president. But we also thought that he'd make a better UN ambassador as we get beyond this stage of the reforms that we've made to the National Security Council.
Marco Rubio, meanwhile, is acting as the interim leader of the National Security Council as the National Security Advisor. Here with me to discuss this is the president of the Republican caucus, Jim Pfaff. Jim, nice to see you here today. Look, I think it's a promotion, but I had a debate here on this network earlier today from folks that don't think Mike Waltz going over to the United Nations is a step up. Here's why I think it is, and you tell me your thoughts. We've got a lot going on with the tariffs and negotiating with the world. You've got the war in Ukraine. You've got what's going on with Hamas and the Houthis. And if you're the ambassador to the United Nations, you're going to be in the thick of all of that. right from day one. I think it's a big job. What do you think?
Well, I think he does have the president's trust, but I do suspect it had something to do with the signal thing. I don't know that for a fact, but, that was an incident that could have ended up being very embarrassing. Certainly they had to work through, and you just have to, be cautious about situations like that. But to be candid, it is a step up, truly, because the UN thing is going to be very, very important. For the reasons you said, but also because we have to assert ourselves in that body constantly. And Donald Trump has a policy of working closely with Israel. The UN is constantly going after Israel in ways that are absurd often. And Mike Waltz is, an effective guy, both in communications and in really taking a tough stand when necessary on those key issues. So I think it's kind of a mix here, and there are going to be some good options for filling that position. Obviously, Marco Rubio's handling it right now, but there are going to be some really good options for helping that key service to the president be able to undertake well.
Marco Rubio's number 2 was suggested for the job, and Marco Rubio said, I like him too much. He's got job lock because a lot of these people are not going to be able to be moved around because people like him. Look, and while we're on this topic, Jim, how good is Marco Rubio doing? I've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks now. I mean, he is rock solid. He's solidly got the president's back. He's on message every time. He's in there in the Oval Office. He is a master when it comes to these sideways questions when he goes on mainstream media, because they throw curveballs at him all the time. And he is a master at defending the administrations, its policies, its agenda, and President Trump. What do you think of the job Marco Rubio is doing?
Listen, he is a great communicator. My one beef with Marco Rubio over time, like he came in as a Tea Party darling in 2010, and very positively so, but he has been supporting the Patriot Act, which I have serious reservations about, been voting to keep that going. I was very worried about what that might mean. I am very pleasantly surprised so far. I think he's done a fantastic job. And especially when the USAID thing came up, he has been masterful in dealing with that and helping the president navigate getting rid of what that institution has been doing. So, yeah, I think he's fabulous so far. At least I don't have any reason to be negative at all, and very many reasons to think that he's serving the president in an excellent way that's going to benefit Trump's agenda.
I would agree with that. He has been solid. And I mean, so, here's the difference, Jim, between Trump's first administration and his second. I don't see a bunch of people clamoring around that appear to be wanting to write books and stab the president in the back. You had a lot of that in the first go-round. I see people that are loyal, on message, disciplined, and doing the work. Oh, do you agree?
Oh, this is one of the best best people in his cabinet and in other areas of the government that I've seen in my lifetime. And I was around for the Reagan administration, and the Reagan administration had a great cabinet, but you had people who were kind of, quirky moderates that were a problem, but they did follow what Reagan wanted to do. Trump has put together very excellent conservative members of this cabinet who also are willing to work for him, and that's just a step up even from Reagan's excellent cabinet. I mean, have to grade it that way. So yeah, this is really helpful for us, because in the previous administration, even the people that were true MAGA people that went in there were suspect in terms of what they were leaking out to the media or how they were undermining the agenda, as there was obvious infighting taking place. Sure. And so you had the John Kelly types that were very problematic. This is really pleasing to see, and it makes me hopeful for what we've got going in the next 4 years.
I would agree with you, Jim. Thank you for being here as always. Have a terrific Friday. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.
All right. Think about it. Every dollar you spend is either supporting your values or working against them. In today's economy where you spend your money matters, that's how we take back our country. Patriot Mobile, leading the way as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Switch today without sacrificing quality or service. You'll get exceptional nationwide coverage because unlike most budget wireless providers, Patriot Mobile has access to all 3 major U.S. networks. You can even add 2 numbers on 2 networks on 1 phone. That's right, something the big guys can't do. Stay connected with flexible unlimited data plans to fit your lifestyle. These plans offer high-speed data, mobile hotspots, international roaming, device protection, and even internet backup. Here's the best part. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're supporting faith, family, and freedom. If you believe in our First and Second Amendment rights, the sanctity of life, and supporting our veterans, this is where you belong. Switching is simple. Keep your number, keep your phone, or you can upgrade if you like. Patriot Mobile has a 100% U.S.-based team that will make your activation easy and in just minutes. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/RAV or call 972-PATRIOT. Get a free month of service with promo code RAV. Make the switch. Defend freedom with every call and text. That's patriotmobile.com/RAV or call 972-PATRIOT. After the break, a story that reminds us of how wonderful America is. Plus, answers to America's Voice question of the day. Is Mike Waltz's nomination to be the ambassador to the United Nations a promotion or a demotion? I answered my position. What's yours? We'll be right back. Mike Waltz's nomination to be the ambassador to the United Nations a promotion or demotion? And why? Roger Pierce has this. Why not? It's a suitable position. And the other guy was ghosted? Other guy. Not sure what he means by that. Ken Hartman. He could have just gotten rid of him, so not a demotion. But I think I have a pretty good idea of what Trump is doing. Really? Well, why don't you share it with us, Ken? That's what we're here to do, to discuss your thoughts. Anyhow, Craig Cassetta. Lateral move. It takes him out of the limelight for their text issues, but puts him into a very influential position for the administration. It allows Rubio, best outspoken advocate to date, to put the bees to bed. Yeah, Rubio's doing a great job. Martha Thomas. If it gets him out of this country, it's a promotion. sure what that means. Richard Ayala, a lot of strange comments on this Friday, folks. It's all right. After a demotion, it's a demotion after the single incident, whether intentional or accidental, he can save face by Trump moving him into a different, less critical role. Eventually, he will leave the administration altogether. Don't know if that's true. Tom Kowal, I support everything President Trump does. Well, that's odd. Susan Wendy Hartman, Reif Schneider, promotion. President Trump puts people in positions that he knows that they will do well in. He saw this man struggling. Therefore, he made a positive change. I think that's a pretty good take on it. Mike McLaughlin, neither. Merely a strategic lateral move, a good allocation of resources. I think it's a promotion. And Tina Warren Zidizo, neither placing him where he can be useful yet out of the media scrutiny. Look, I can't pronounce that name. I'm doing the best I can. Catherine Blackhawk, demotion because now Trump doubts him. He can't be trusted. I don't believe that at all. It's not a demotion. Catherine, if he didn't trust him, he wouldn't be there. That's fact. That is a fact. Donald Trump would say you're fired. What a busy week once again. Donald Trump in Michigan. That was a great rally on Tuesday. We loved it to mark the 100th day. It was good stuff. Anyhow, hope you have a fabulous weekend. I do. Start your Monday morning with me, bright and early on the Steve Rivers Show to begin broadcasting on Monday and then back for America's Voice Live.
Tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro.
Steve Bannon.
Now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
There's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
There it is. It's 4 o'clock, folks. When you see that and you hear that bell ring right there, this is New York Stock Exchange closing the market for the day, for the weekend, in fact. And we can take a look at the prices. A very good day on Wall Street today. Very, very nice day. 579 up for the Dow, almost 1.5%. NASDAQ, 276. These are great numbers, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. Usually on a Friday, with a lot of things hanging, especially things like tariffs, and who knows if there's a trade war going on in China. What people would get a little nervous. You'd see that maybe go down. The VIX, something we've been talking about for a long time. The VIX down to 22.50. I mean, that thing spikes when there's nervousness. It goes down when it's calming. This is all good. Gold, $3,240 a barrel. Here's the one. Here's the oil. I'm sorry, the barrel. Oil, gold bar ounce. Oil, $58.49 a barrel. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you, during the entirety of the Biden presidency, I don't think it hit that low price. I know it was trading $80, $90, $100, over $100 a barrel for most of that presidency because he didn't know what the hell he was doing with the energy prices. He let him go. He didn't want to drill. He didn't want to allow companies to drill offshore on federal lands. And that's why oil prices were going up during the Biden administration. Trump, we know, opens these things up for drilling, brings the price of oil down. And by the way, when that price of oil goes down, price of everything goes down. A tomato grown in California, sold in New York, will go down because you have to drive the tomato or train the tomato across the country. That's energy cost. Everything goes down when oil prices go down. That's all good news, especially Dow 41,000, because a lot of people do have money in 401ks. Let's bring our chief White House correspondent, Brian Glenn. We'll talk a little bit about President Trump signing an executive order to cut federal funding for NPR and PBS. And Brian, as you know, let the folks know, we get these little alerts. I woke up this morning, there's a whole bunch of them, a whole lot of them, but this one really resonated for folks like us in the media. Tell us what you think, what you hear, what you know.
It did. Good afternoon, Eric. I actually got the notification on a flight out of D.C. last night because all of a sudden X just kind of blew up with this executive order. And it's not surprising because if you remember just a few months ago, NPR, PBS was brought in front of the sub-DOGE committee about federal funding going to these two individual companies. And really it revealed a lot of the corruption. And I say corruption in terms of covering the news, the biased opinion that they have towards conservatives, toward this country, one could argue, and that federal tax dollars did not have to continue to go to these organizations. And Eric, when you look at, I think it's $535 million a year get placed to be able to fund these two organizations. Now, also, it's important to point out, Eric, that I believe PBS government funding only represents 16% of their overall budget. So the majority of their operational revenue comes from subscribers, donors, big foundations. If you've ever watched one of your favorite shows on PBS and they say this program brought to you by the so-and-so foundation, well, those guys are stroking some pretty sizable checks to get that going. So President Trump signed that EO saying, you know what, we no longer need to fund these organizations, and it's kind of causing a meltdown.
Yeah,
they're already threatening about suing. It says it violates their First Amendment right. Eric, how many broadcast companies have you worked for in your career? I would imagine quite a few.
Three or this is. I don't know if I don't really work here. I do the show, but I broadcast out of here. Fox, Sinclair, and Newsmax. Okay, so let's think about this for a second, Eric. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if Sinclair, Nexstar, Gray Television, Tegna, let's say they all got together and say, wait a minute, they're saying that our founding fathers said it's our constitutional right that the federal government fund public television. That's not the case. It was a privilege for those two organizations to get federal funding. It's not guaranteed. It's not constitutionally protected. So my point being, they should compete like every other broadcast company that I've ever worked for and that exists. And so I say, have fun in the open market, and we'll let the people decide if they want to watch it or not.
And the whole point, here's the issue, right? And it's kind of the same issue with the universities like Harvard, for example, and Trump pulling, talking about pulling funding, permanently pulling it, not just holding it back, but permanently pulling it. When you use tax dollars to fund NPR and PBS, you're taking money from people who agree with and disagree with whatever they're putting on the screen. In this case, NPR and PBS are putting wildly liberal leftist stuff up there. And I can read some of the things that the Trump administration put out. In 21, NPR declared Declaration of Independence to be a document with flaws and deeply ingrained hypocrisy. This is things that conservatives like us don't agree with. So when you fund these groups, for example, example, NPR staffed with 87 registered Democrats and 0 Republicans in editorial roles. When you fund it with all the people's money, it should represent all the people's interest. Content that they deliver should represent that. Likewise, when you fund Harvard with hundreds of billions of dollars, which blows my mind why we would, they've got a $52 billion endowment, they should be producing content for students that represents the people that they're being paid by to do this stuff. I just don't understand how it's taken so long. You know, you talk about Trump's common sense. This is something that should have been done ages ago.
I think so too. You know, and we're not saying that those programs won't exist. They're still going to listen to All Things Considered on NPR, where they whisper for, 60 minutes. You can still watch that. You can still watch Big Bird, Sesame Street, still watch your favorite shows. They're just not going to be funded by U.S. tax dollars. And I think it's also important to point out that, this goes for any type of, I would say, news organization. They should not be getting, and look, we don't have the money for it anyway. They get $535 million a year. That's a lot of money. And right now, since we have an explosive deficit, I think these cuts make financial sense. And it is fighting the cultural war, Eric. I think to a certain degree, it does force these companies to tell the truth. And I happen to be friends with a young lady that works for NPR. I see her at the White House quite often. She is a very nice person. I have nothing against her personally at all. And she has every right to work for NPR, and I hope they pay her well. But I just don't think American tax dollars should be funding organizations like this. And especially, Eric, you and I are about the same age bracket. When you and I grew up watching Sesame Street, watching a lot of shows on PBS, it was not the same back then as it is now. They have gone completely in the opposite direction of any type of common sense.
Big Bird was a bird, and Bernie and Bert and Ernie weren't gay at the time when I grew up. Oh, call me crazy. NPR apologized for calling illegal immigrants illegals. They apologized for that. NPR in 2021 aired a children's program that featured a drag queen named Little Miss Hot Mess, a drag queen to children on NPR. I mean, this is insane that taxpayer dollars are going towards this. Look, it's the same thing we say, or I would say, I'm libertarian, and I would say, you want to be a drag person, or queen, you want to be, do LGBTQ, do it, whatever you want in your private time. Yeah. Leave the children out of it. Leave the kids out of it. And then on top of that, I pay taxes. I don't want my tax dollars supporting a Little Miss Hot Mess drag queen talking to the kids. It's insanity.
Yeah. And if you remember, in that subcommittee hearing that Marjorie did a few months ago, they denied that this drag queen program even made it on air. And then in the break, they pulled a flat screen panel TV out and queued it up and said, is this the video that you claim that did not air, that has an air date on there? Right. It's twisted. It's a cultural war. And I think we won yesterday with this executive order. Now, here's the kicker here. Now we have to codify this into law. We need to have our Congress, have our Senate get together, make sure that we take all executive orders, not just this one, but all of them. Let's make sure that when the next administration gets into office, God willing, not for a while, I would hope, that they don't just roll these things back. So we need to make sure that we make that it's not budgeted anymore. Let me make a correction on this. It's not that it goes into law. It's that this is not put in an additional budget in the future. That's what's important. But as far as executive orders, we just got to make sure those things legislatively get through and they go into law, but just not executive orders.
So, okay, it's a Friday, Brian, and how playful are you at this moment? So the weekend's coming, playful mood, in a serious mood. Where are you on this? I have two things I could do, and I got 3 minutes to do it, so I'm debating which one to do here. And it depends if you're up for a little game or not.
I am up for a little game. It's on Gruber's show. I said it was Free Beer Friday. I don't drink beer right now, and it's Friday, but let's go ahead and have some fun.
Well, I haven't had a White Claw, but I do drink White Claw, and this is just water in here. But I would. This game would be a lot
Celsius,
more fun.
By the way, this is Celsius.
This game would be a lot more fun if this was White Claw in here. All right, Mad Dog, are you ready? So, Brian, we're going to roll out a game that I developed at one of the other networks, and I'm going to bring it here because it was just way too much fun. It's called Date, Debate, or Deport. And it's a play on the old thing, marry, date, F.
Yeah.
Date, debate, deport. So I'm going to give you 3 names, and you have to decide which one you would date, which one you would debate, and which one you would deport. Can we get the 3, Mad Dog? Ready? Here they are. Okay. No order whatsoever. Here it is. Go ahead. There's Ilhan Omar. Okay, next one, Mad Dog. AOC. And then finally, Jasmine Crockett. So your choices are Jasmine Crockett, AOC, and Ilhan Omar. You have to date one, debate one, deport one. Go for it.
Ilhan Omar, deport. Okay. AOC, I may get in trouble on this one.
Oh, wait. Can I just agree with you on that? I mean, she basically told America that she was working for the Somali government anyway. But go ahead. So now you're going to deport.
Do we both agree on that one?
We're going to agree on this. So now you have AOC and Jasmine Crockett. You have to debate one and date and debate one. Which one are you going to date? Which one are you debate?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go. Let's start. I'll start on AOC. I'm going to go date on that one. I don't know what your guess is.
I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go ahead and agree with you.
Okay.
Because I've been offering Jasmine Crockett a debate for the entirety of my time here. I've offered her, let's debate.
Plus, you know what? On the debate on Jasmine Crockett, you wouldn't have to say much. Just let her go. It's going to be very viral, so she's going to incriminate herself just from her attempt at debating you. Should be fun. But that's my 3.
And that's amazing.
Date.
That's a date, debate, deport. And we're going to deport Ilhan Omar. We're going to date AOC. And then we're going to debate Jasmine Crockett.
Do you know that the radical left's going to clip this right now, and they're going to push it out. They're going to say Eric Bolling admits on air to wanting to date AOC. And, of course, they're going to include my name on that as well. And then God knows where that goes down.
I should have preempted it with, if there was a gun to your head, or if we were doing a drinking game.
If there was a gun,
I mean, I prefer not to date AOC, to be honest with you. But it's, my wife is watching. So anyway, Brian Glenn, we always have a good time. And folks, we are going to bring this to the show. So if you want to hit me up with some ideas, date, debate, deport, I'm all for it. Brother.
Let's do it.
Brian, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week, and safe travels.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you back on Monday at the White House. Thank you.
Okay, brother. All right, before we head to break, just wanted to remind you all about the podcast and YouTube on my YouTube page and the podcast page. You got to go there and subscribe. You guys of course we put the show up there, but we put a bunch of other stuff up there as well. Unique content. Hit subscribe. It's free, and you'll never miss a thing. All right, we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. International Falls, Minnesota. Is that ice? Is that snow still? No, come on, Mad Dog. Is it?
It is snow, man.
There's snow
I think it's ice
still. Ice? The lake's frozen? Lots of lakes in Minnesota, right? All right, folks, this July, there's a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio de Janeiro, the bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, and many, many more. Well, they decided to meet with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. They're calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, global demand for U.S. dollars will plummet, bringing down the value of the dollars in your savings. While this transition won't happen overnight, the Rio Reset in July, again, coming up soon, marks a pivotal moment when BRICS objectives move decisively from theoretical possibilities towards an inevitable reality. Learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting my name or Eric or America, actually, to 989898 with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Tens of thousands of happy customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation info kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Very important date, guys. Text Eric or America to 989898 today. By the way, Eric is right in the middle of America. You can't spell America without Eric. Did you know that? Well, it's a tale of two parties. One, the Democrats, who only want the country's demise. Two, Republicans who want American exceptionalism to thrive. And it's the tale of two presidencies. One president panders to a graduating college class for votes, dishes negativity about America, and the crowd hates him for it.
The most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
Yeah, well, the other president instead gives hope to a graduating college class. They feel the energy. Give the energy back. Give the love back to him, even making the rest of us hopeful about the future of the country.
The first graduating class of the golden age of America. We're in the golden age. You watch. It's the golden age.
Last night, President Trump gave a speech that's truly significant against the backdrop of this country's transition. Here are some of the highlights. There was this notable moment last year when Joe Biden gave the commencement speech at Morehouse College. Remember this one? A small number of graduates turned their seats away from the stage during Biden's speech, and many listened with their heads down. Fewer than 24 of the more than 400 graduating students stood up and applauded the speech. And in between the moments of confusion, thanks to his onset dementia, it was pandering in overdrive.
I got more Morehouse men in the White House telling me what to do than I know what to do. You all think I'm kidding, don't you? You know I'm not. And it's the best thing that's happened to me.
Well, now remember, Joe is still in the race at this point when he was making that speech. This is before the debate that got him tossed aside by his own party. So he was up there trying to get those young black votes, since polls showed he was hemorrhaging young black voters. And he thought the way to do that would be to use the Obama approach, race baiting and division.
You start a college just as George Floyd was murdered. And there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
Well, this is from Joe Biden, who has made all kinds of racist comments in his 50 years as an elected official, and yet sells himself as the greatest civil rights champion ever. And here's the big guy at Howard University pandering again by stoking racial division.
The most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy. And I'm not saying this because I'm at a black HBCU. I say wherever I go.
No, that's not exactly why he's saying. You see, Joe had an opportunity to instill either hope or anger. And in typical Biden and typical Democrat style, he chose violence. And how did Howard students feel about that? Well, watch.
This is the worst graduation of my life. This is a campaign speech. A campaign speech. You got this white man here, Howard. What is going on? I would have given a better speech. I did give a better speech at my high school graduation. We could have had somebody who actually did something good for something good for the black community.
Everyone knows that Joe Biden did nothing good for the black community, and these students saw right through it. Divisive, race baiting, truly kind of disgusting, right? Which brings us to last night. You can feel the excitement right when President Trump was called to the stage. Roll Tide. It was patriotic. It was exciting. It was palpable. Him shaking Nick Saban's hand. That's the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. You can feel the difference, right? You can see the difference between the Biden address and Trump last night. They respected him last night. They love him. And here's an example of why.
First, if you're here today and think that you're too young to do something great, let me tell you that you are wrong. You're not too young. You can have great success at a very young age. You're all very young. In America, with drive and ambition, young people can do anything. Go out and fight right from the beginning, from the day you leave this incredible university. Go out and fight tough, fight fair, but go out and fight. You're going to be very successful, because now is the time to work harder than you have ever worked before, push yourself further than you have ever pushed yourself before. Find your limits and then smash through everything.
That's inspiring. Now, let's stop for a moment and recognize the significance here. The University of Alabama, not Harvard, not Yale, not Notre Dame or Georgetown. The president is from New York. Why not any of those institutions? That says so much already. And what did President Trump choose to do with the moment? He inspired them. He inspired them to be a part of our national renewal. And he showed confidence in those youngsters, those young men and women who are going to go out and be the next leaders of the free world. And he pretty much nailed the MAGA movement in a single sentence, didn't he?
Borders are not racist. Speech is not violence. America is good. Terrorists are bad. Men can never become women. Police are not criminals, and criminals are not victims.
The tale of two presidents, one instilling anger and fear, another instilling hope and wisdom. You see, it's not just the fact that Joe Biden couldn't even manage to stay upright at a graduation. Boom. It's what he chose to do with the moments when he was speaking, the chance to speak to the future of America, the future of our companies, of our government, because Joe Biden clearly chose those moments not just to pander, but to be angry.
Never forget, America is the strongest when we lead not only by our example of our power, but by the power of our example. You can clap for that.
Whereas President Trump didn't chide them. Instead, he instilled hope and trust in these graduates to make the media, journalism, trustworthy again.
To the journalism majors, of which I've had a lot of problems with. So I must be honest. I'm not sure I like them. No, I do. But you're really leading a very thing, because we need a great and free press. We need a brilliant press. They're like a watchkeeper. They're very important, and you can go out and take it down a new track.
Desperately need a new track, because here's the thing. Despite the example we just showed of how Joe Biden used the moment to push the race narrative and get angry and political at these graduations, that's all forgotten by the legacy media. Quote, in Alabama commencement speech, Trump mixes in the political. I mean, he is the president. Yes, he talked about men playing in women's sports. Yes, he talked about the economy. These graduates are the future, and they're going out into the world. You would expect the president of the United States to talk about those things. But he didn't incite anger and violence. He didn't poop all over the country. He used the moment to remind these kids that even though it did seem hopeless at times, it's looking good. It's looking better for America again, which is exactly what they needed to hear.
The last 4 years were not good for our country, but don't let that scare you. It was an aberration. We're run by people who truly, at that time, 4 years, we were run by people that didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue. I'm trying to be nice when I say it that way.
See, the difference here is, whereas Joe Biden pushes for their votes by pandering so obviously and pathetically, or scolds them to clap for him, he never showed that he valued and respected those folks. And that's the obvious difference. Not just that Joe Biden was weekend at Bernie's and President Trump, on the other hand, is energetic, lucid, funny, but as always, he was genuine and respectful. Like I said, it's a tale of two parties and two presidencies, one that relishes in the destruction of America and one that exudes hope for our present and our future. 2.5 minutes. We'll be right back. Key West, Florida, the southernmost point of the United States, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Beautiful. It's really cool. That pier right there, every Sunday afternoon as the sun sets, there's a wild party that goes on there. Just a whole heck of a lot of fun. And it's a hike. It's a good, 3 hours from the point where you hit the Keys and end up in Key West along that long ride. And there's a 7-mile bridge, which is just stunning to drive over. All right, folks, welcome back. My next guest says he may have the solution to combating some cancers. Let's bring in Chief of Maternal and Paternal Health at the wellness company, Dr. James Thorpe. Dr. James, really good to have you. The McCullough Foundation covered a fascinating new study that shows that ivermectin, particularly when used in concert with mebendazole, I believe I'm saying it right, is showing promise in combating some types of cancers. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, what I can say is that over the last several years, there seems to be several different sources suggesting some anecdotal evidence that this ivermectin, which, as you know, has been a miracle drug with regards to treatment of COVID-19, but it also appears to have some efficacy against not only COVID-19, but also against parasites, and also, stunningly, against some cancers. Now, to be clear, there aren't randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trials proving this, but by the way, there are none proving efficacy of any of the vaccines that the United States FDA and government have on your schedule. So, but these reports are anecdotal. They're observational studies from around the world showing that indeed ivermectin, in combination with mebendazole, sometimes fenbendazole, which is a related drug, have some very significant efficacy in treating some advanced cancers when traditional therapies have been abandoned.
And Doc, I remember this whole discussion about ivermectin. It was cheap, it wasn't expensive, and Trump liked the idea of exploring it, and then the left went, as soon as Trump liked something, the left went apoplectic about it. So why do the pharmaceuticals, is it because they're so cheap, they push back on things like the possibility that ivermectin may actually be useful?
That's absolutely right. Remember, ivermectin, won a Nobel Prize, essentially, if you will. It's a very, very safe. I don't think there's another drug in my 45-year career that has such a strong safety profile. I don't know of any side effects from it. It has an incredible safety range, and it is very effective. So, yes, the left went nuts. The same thing with hydroxychloroquine. Now, we at the Wellness Company are providing this. Of course, it's not marketed. We're marketing it as a anti-parasite, as a parasite cleanse. But I think that everybody knows that from reports all around the world, many different countries, it appears to have some significant efficacy against cancers, and people are using it off-label for treating or preventing cancers.
Very quickly, Doc, just a couple of seconds. What cancer? What types of cancers or other uses for ivermectin are you talking about?
Well, I think Dr. William Mackus has, up in Canada, has reported efficacy against a wide variety of different cancers, including breast cancer, including bowel cancer, including pancreatic cancers, many different advanced cancers.
Wow, good. Great. Appreciate your time, Dr. James Thorpe. Awesome information. We'll keep an eye. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
And you too, sir. All right, Jen Psaki just dropped one of the most radical and I would call dangerous conspiracy theories about Donald Trump. Listen to this absolute madness.
What I've found is that whenever he's trying to do something that seems a little weird, shiny ballish, I'll call it. I mean, something like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America or going after Greenland. He wants Greenland. He's doing something even worse behind the scenes. And so one of the lessons I've learned is you have to read all the fine print and you have to follow the threads of stories, because if not, you're going to be focused on talking about Greenland while he is trying to get the personal data of Americans, put them on the cloud, sell it to China, go to the homes of undocumented immigrants who are paying taxes, whatever it may be. That's what's happening behind the scenes while he's talking about Greenland and the Gulf of America.
Now, while you were not on, in the news.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wore my Gulf of America shirt. Refute Jen Psaki. By the way, I have some really cool information about who used Gulf of America this morning on CNBC. Real important. Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer. Well, They may be radical Democrat dinosaurs, but apparently that doesn't mean they always see eye to eye. Here's Bernie with Caitlin Collins, no less, talking about the lack of unity on the left when Chuck Schumer says they're united.
We pressed Senator Schumer about this last night in terms of what is the strategy coming from Democrats on the Hill. Do you guys have a cohesive message in how to deal with Trump 100 days in? This is one part of what he had to say in response to that.
Our caucus is united. You know, look at this. The Republicans on this upcoming reconciliation bill, which sets the funding for the whole government, they're fighting with each other. Compare that to the Democrats. We're totally united. We're totally united in my caucus.
What Democrats lack right now is a vision for the future.
I'm assuming you're...
I think that last guy was right. Not the other guy, but the guy was on last.
So, I mean, it's not surprising. You believe you're right and Senator Schumer's wrong here.
You need an agenda. Did you hear it? You're not united around what?
I think the two of them, Mr. Millionaires and Billionaires and Chucky Schumer, that time for them to go. I mean, term limits, folks. Those are two prime examples. Nancy Pelosi, term limits. Mitch McConnell, term limits, my man. Just time. Just hang it up. All right, guys. Don't forget the podcast. And this show it airs on the podcast, but also on our YouTube page. Go there, you subscribe to Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Subscribe. It's free. You get this content and a bunch of other stuff. Always really want to have you catch everything we do. And now, by the way, they send you some information, some new stuff, too. That's not only on this show as well. So think about that. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Now, Mad Dog, this is really cool. Come on, let's tell the folks what this is. It's an active volcano.
This is an active volcano.
Yeah. Where?
I don't even know how to say it.
Let's try.
Kilauea, Hawaii.
Okay, cool. Kilauea, Hawaii. The reason why I asked you to do it because I just was tongue-tied on some drugs I've never heard of. I knew ivermectin and hydrochloroquine, but that other drug I'd never heard of, and I got pretty tied up on that one. So hey, look, this is what we do, folks. We just have fun. I mean, we don't worry about it. We don't stress. Right, dog? Right, Mad Dog? Can we get the control room cam on? There they are. Oh, where's your hat? I thought you were going to wear the hat.
Oh, it's right here. Sorry, I put it aside. It kept falling off.
You have no string underneath it. There's Colin.
Yeah,
there's
no
Ben. There's Drew. There's Matt in the back. There they are. And that's Mad Dog right up front. Okay, what's this? We're giving out awards for corruption. That's great. That's right. It looks like one of the most corrupt institutions in America continues to reward itself, pat itself on the back for lack of journalism. So that 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris, the center of President Trump's lawsuit against CBS, well, has received, drumroll please, an Emmy nomination. I'm serious. Are these the most delusional, self-unaware people ever? They really circle the wagons, don't they? So first, they're giving out awards for finally recognizing Biden's obvious decline into dementia last weekend at the White House Correspondents Association dinner. Watch.
The judges said Thompson's aggressive reporting on President Biden, especially leading up to and after the Trump-Biden debate, revealed the president's cognitive decline was impacting his ability to do his job. Information the White House tried to conceal.
She says with a smile that the award acceptance, which is somehow supposed to absolve an entire industry's cover-up.
I say this because acknowledging errors builds trust, and being defensive about them further erodes it. We should have done better.
Oh, my gosh. Should have done better, says Alex Thompson. I love how he makes it sound like they just kind of missed the mark a little bit. That word better doesn't really do it, Alex. Sorry. Better doesn't cover it, not even remotely. Better doesn't cover it because you media, you clowns in that room actively covered up what we, the rational, sane half of America, saw with our own eyes and heard with our own ears. A president losing his facilities in real time. Couldn't remember people's names, calling out dead people, falling. And you said he was fine. But now, the interview that's at the center of President Trump's high-stakes lawsuit against CBS News is an Emmy-nominated program. But not just that, 60 Minutes in all of its BS journalism glory also landed several Emmy nominations, which were announced on Tuesday. Get this, the interview is nominated for, you can't make this up. You cannot make this up. The reason why Trump is suing CBS for the Kamala Harris interview is because they edited it. They selectively edited it. They took an answer that she was asked a question, she fumbled it badly, and they took an answer to another question and they edited it right onto the back of it. That's what they did. Guess what? Stop rolling prompter. Guess what happened? The Emmys decided that massively edited, that Trump is suing them for, CBS, deserved an Emmy for the best editing. I can't make this up. Election interference at its worst, folks. You need very fancy editing to try and make Kamala Harris look even remotely intelligent. So yeah, that might be the one award that kind of makes sense here. Here's just a little taste of that superb editing that they're referring to, by the way. Watch this.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
They took a bumbled answer and they cut it, threw it away, and took an answer to something else she answered and put it on to answer that. That is not even journalism. That's just outright lying propaganda BS. I'm sorry. There's just no other way to frame it. That's state television propaganda. That's some Cuba-style, Stalin-style propaganda dished out to influence voters in a major presidential election just a few weeks leading up to that election. That's it. That's not the First Amendment. That's not protectable. That's not free speech. That's election interference. I mean, we all know she was an idiot anyway, but for those watching those interviews, making their voting decisions based on what they heard and saw on CBS, that's lying. That's BS. And they're nominated for an Emmy for it. Don't forget, the executive producer resigned over this. This program has been declining into oblivion, into disgrace for years over its obvious political leaning and bias, its false reporting, and disgusting moments like this one when Leslie Stahl felt the need to defend who? Oh, the terrorists, Hamas.
They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
Yeah. So on top of already handing out awards for failing in their field, failing the American people about Joe Biden's mental state, these people are giving out awards for propaganda. Dangerous propaganda covering up for an inept president. It's a brand new low, even for these clowns, for that crowd. This is some Soviet era stuff right there. And they're now rewarding themselves, patting themselves on the back at failing at their jobs. And then doing the bare minimum once it was so very clear, very, very clear that the cat was fully out of the bag and could no longer be covered up, that Joe Biden was permanently gone, out of it, lost in the woods. And only then did they even try to do their jobs. Or even now, they're saying they missed the mark a little bit. Award-worthy? Award-worthy? Are you out of your freaking minds? Giving yourself an award, an Emmy Award for editing into propaganda, you people are disgusting. You're horrible people. Even though the entire world knows the truth about old Joe Biden's sleep decline and steep decline, Jasmine Crockett still feels she needs now to lie about it.
Implication being those people think he has made mistakes.
Listen, I'm going to tell you this. People try to talk about the mental acuity of Joe Biden. And as someone who was able to interact with him, I never questioned his mental acuity. But come on now. Come on. Like, you are crashing the economy. We are talking about record.
Chuck Todd took Crockett's sentiment a step further. Here's Chuck Todd. Remember, he was at NBC for a long time. Here he is defending the media's coverage of Biden's decline to Russell Brand, who absolutely lit him on fire. Listen to this exchange.
This is not a media failure. This is a failure of the Democratic Party. And I just sort of the virtue signaling that some people have done to try to say that the media missed this story. They didn't miss this story.
It wasn't like the government was feeding false information to the media. The media was actively participating. Remember? Don't you remember Rachel Maddow going, Joe Biden, he's older, but he's smarter. This is the best version of Joe Biden. Don't you remember Morning Joe Scarborough? He's as sharp as a tack. Don't you remember that spate of headlines and clips of everyone going, Joe Biden, he may look old to the untrained eye, but if you hone in under binoculars, you'll see he's got a firm and mighty, rampant like Genghis Khan. I don't know, man. I can't see it. I'm seeing an old guy, baffled, talking about corn pop and sniffing a child on the head. What are you guys all watching?
We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Monument Valley, Utah. I don't know if you care, but it's one of those four-wheeler things in Utah in the desert. It's pretty amazing, pretty beautiful. I'm about climbing in Utah. They have some massive peaks to climb. It's an awesome place. All right, as always, my favorite time of the day of the show, and I get to spend a few minutes with the one and only Stephen K. Bannon, and as I've called him, I've named him the spirit animal of MAGA, and my spirit animal, not Chris Cuomo, who took my nickname for Steve Bannon. But anyway, Steve, how you doing, brother? You good?
I'm doing great, and you just showed my favorite place in the United States of America, Monument Valley, where John Ford made all the great westerns, many great westerns there. I think the greatest story ever told, the story of Christ's life, was made there. And Goulding's Fort or Goulding's Ranch is there, the famous hotel right underneath the cliffs in Monument Valley. If anybody gets a chance to go, Eric, it is the most amazing site in the United States.
It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. There's some hiking places where you can, I think it's called Angel's Landing on one of in Zion's Peak or Zion National Park, and some of the other ones, Bryce National Park. Gorgeous place to walk, and you have to be in shape to get to the top of those. And by the way, bring a lot of water, because they don't tell you that. And a lot of people fall off the sides of these cliffs. I don't know if you realize that, but it's not for the beginners. Let's put it that way. Hey, I saw this morning. Actually, a friend of mine sent me this. My friends Susan and Frank were watching CNBC, and they said, Bolling, did you see this? This is amazing. The Shell company CEO, the oil company, Shell, right? Well, watch. Notice how he refers to that body of water off our southwestern South. Watch.
Course, done responsibly, of course. And what we see is a move much more towards pragmatic regulation, which I think is important. At the same time, we're starting to see some of that filter back straight into our own business. There was, for example, a recent decision in the Gulf of America around the commingling in a particular part of the basin.
You hear that? Gulf of America by the Shell CEO. You gotta love that guy, right? How good is that?
Hold it with a royal Dutch Shell accent, saying Gulf of America just rolls off the tongue. Hey, on a Friday, I'm getting tired of winning already. That's amazing.
I broke out the Gulf of America shirt just in honor of that Royal Dutch Shell CEO, acknowledging what we already knew. It's the Gulf of America.
Yeah. Gulf of America, unbelievable. Hey, I drink your milkshake right there in Gulf of America.
Drink my milkshake. Yesterday you asked me about the NSA, and then we saw that Rubio's going to handle the NSA and the State Department, Secretary of State. There's some rumblings, which I think I would love this idea. I said maybe, I don't know, bring Witkoff in, make Rubio the NSA, but I like this idea better. Put Rubio back in Secretary of State in the state. He's doing a great job there. Stephen Miller for NSA. What do you think of that?
Stephen Miller, look, is an extraordinary individual. I just think that given everything we have to accomplish on the policy side, remember, he's head of the Domestic Policy Council, plus he's Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. That means every vertical is reporting to Stephen. And in addition, he's essentially Homan's partner on the border. And Stephen is not just sealing the border, which Stephen with Homan and the president did in 60 days. It's also the deportations. I'm just afraid of loading up just too much on one guy. Stephen Miller is so valuable to us and what we're trying to accomplish in the first couple of years. I just think he stays there. My recommendation is just keep Rubio for a while. It's more important to restaff the NSC now and get the neocons out. And then where all this parlor game about who's going to be the new NSA, I think is just more palace intrigue. I would keep Stephen Miller exactly where he is, keep the mandate exactly what he's got. The guy's killing it. There's so many massive issues out there. Keep Rubio, restaff under Rubio, get a great deputy under Rubio, a great deputy that's a America First deputy that can run the joint, and let Rubio just be a safe pair of hands for a while, and let's figure this out in the fall. When the Russia deal's farther down the road, we've decided not to bomb the Persians. We stopped the oil coming out of Persia. all these things we can do now. I just think you get another NSA guy. It's more palace intrigue. He's going to restaff. I just think there's other ways to do it, and Miller's too valuable where he is.
Very quick. If there were an organizational chart, and I wouldn't even know what it looked like, Miller would be above the NSA currently?
The NSA, look, the NSA has 252, I think still 252 billets. It had 292 when Flynn took over. The NSA is way too big. It's got to be, you've got to downsize it. You have to take, because remember, 2/3 of the NSC people are seconded from other agencies. And I think half of those have to be sent back immediately. A ton of those people are not President Trump people. It's the same problem we had the first time. Obviously, Mike Waltz did not get on top of it. Mike was given a lot of guidance about what to do, particularly about personnel. You saw the personnel was just, horrific. Look, Bolling, the Financial Times of London. We talked about in the morning show. The Financial Times of London, Trump ditches Waltz after MAGA wrath builds against National Security Advisor, and the whole article is about Laura Loomer. Now, the Financial Times of London does not give Laura Loomer on the front page unless there is a huge staffing problem. That still exists. That's got to be dealt with. You got to get these, particularly people who are already government employees that are there, seconded from the Defense Department, from the intelligence community, CIA, from Justice Department, from DHS. They all got to go. You clean that rat's nest out. You start restaffing under a really smart deputy to Rubio, and then later you get some of these other big deals done, some of these sanctions done.
There's one other guy who's available who will make a lot of sense because he's freaking smart. He's really smart. I think his name is Stephen Keith Bannon. Or Kevin.
That's actually King. That's actually King. Right. No, it's Kevin. No, I've got a full-time job babysitting you late in your show on Friday afternoons.
You want one of these shirts? If I get you one of these shirts, will you wear it? Gulf of America.
We're gonna hang on. The only reason I didn't wear it the other day, you had the wrong size. You had like an extra large. No, of course I'm a medium.
No, that was Stephen Bannon is my spirit animal shirt, which I gave you, and I gave Cuomo, that nut job who stole my idea. I gave him one too. I'm wearing a Gulf of America shirt. Yeah, put the glasses. See, I'll get you.
Yes. We'll put that up on War Room.
I'll send
Gulf of America is amazing.
I'll send you.
By the way, Mad Dog, your producer gets the best clips ever. Just amazing. How
Mad Dog, the best. Can we quick control room shot? Quick! Hurry up! There they are. There's the team.
Look at that right there.
Hey.
There they are.
Hey, Bannon, have a great weekend. Have a great show, brother. Talk to you Monday.
Bolling, it was great to see you this week. A big week here in D.C. in the Imperial Capital and down in Palm Beach. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Okay, a lot to get to. We're going to go to Natalie about updates at the White House. Liz, you're going to join us. Chip Roy, budget, economics, national security, all of it. Ashley Babbitt, I believe the government's about to announce a deal with Ashley Babbitt. They've at least the civil part of this has been, it looks like it's been rectified. We're going to try to get details of all that. We got a great cold open. Let's go ahead and let it rip.
Graduates of the Alabama class of 2025 standing here before you in this magnificent arena, it is clear to see the next chapter of the American story will not be written by the Harvard Crimson. It will be written by you, the Crimson Tide. That's true. That's true. That's true. I thought that was rather clever. If you look at what's going on, they get their $5 billion a year. That is not going to be so forthcoming. Now, wasn't that a clever one, though? Huh? Who would think of that? Because this...
The markets are on an upswing today, reacting to news of a better-than-expected jobs report and signals from Beijing that China might be open to one day maybe engaging in trade talks with the United States. Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans and national affairs correspondent for The Nation, John Nichols. All right, jobs numbers, explain them to me, please.
Yeah, they were resilient. They were decent. I mean, I'm telling you, we've been so worried about this economy showing signs of cracks. The labor market has been this steady, consistent performer for the past few years. Now, these aren't the gangbusters job numbers that we saw maybe a year or two ago, but they're still good. 100, that's enough jobs created to keep the unemployment rate right there at a historically low 4.2%. I did see some federal job layoffs in here. We'll see more of those in the months ahead.
And this is not like a summer jump for summer jobs and summer retail or summer whatever.
Not yet. And we are just on the cusp of whatever. So this jobs report, like survey period, was the week after so-called Liberation Day. So, I don't think there was a bunch of firing because of worries about layoffs or about tariffs that were in this number. That would happen later in the summer.
A big product fair in China and how it's less busy than usual. This is where a lot of American businesses or retailers would go to pick out their products that they'd sell to the American consumer over the year. And it's not as busy as it normally is because America was a giant customer for China and Chinese goods. Does that mean that we are maybe in a decent negotiating position with China?
Sure, we're always in a negotiating position. The question of whether it's decent or indecent is sort of in the eye of the beholder. One thing to understand, the United States and China have been negotiating on trade for 50 years or more. And it's often been very intensive. Even now, there are people who communicate with each other every day. And so when you look at a trade fair or something like that, you are seeing anticipation of the future. The anticipation of the future at this point is a little bit shaky because, people are scared. They're uncertain, and uncertainty, affects all of this. But at the end of the day, that's also something that brings people into the negotiating table. And my sense is that, if you understand that the frameworks are already there, it's not just China, it's countries around the world that have trade relationships with the United States. And many of those countries, I've talked to people around the world, I was just in Europe, people are saying, look, we're ready to walk up to that table and say, here's what we've got right now. We'd like to continue it. Do you want to alter it some? How would we do that, et cetera? It's the same with the Chinese. So I'm always a little skeptical when they say, oh, China has indicated that they're willing to negotiate. China's always willing to negotiate. It's just a question of what you get in that negotiation. Right now, because of the tension, I think there's a lot of desire, certainly on the side of the Chinese, maybe also on the side of the United States, to get something that calms it down and gets those trade fairs much busier.
President Trump is trying to strong-arm public broadcasting, signing an executive order yesterday aimed at cutting federal funding for NPR and PBS, arguing that they are left-wing propaganda, his words. In response, NPR called the order an affront to the First Amendment. The president has been trying to limit or intimidate institutions whose speech he does not agree with for months now, going after private universities like Harvard and Columbia, other media companies like NBC, ABC, and CBS, law firms who bring cases he does not agree with, and even individuals who have spoken truths he would rather not accept, like his former CISA head, Chris Krebs, who said the 2020 election was fair.
This is the primal scream of a dying regime. Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
It's Friday, 2 May, year of our Lord 2025. Just as we are coming on A story breaking in the Washington Post, that would be the Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Democracy Dies in Darkness Washington Post, that President Trump, their headline, President Trump plans significant or deep cuts into the intelligence community, starting with the CIA. It's being reported that 1,200 CIA personnel out of approximately 22,000, because I think that's actually a classified number, but the public number they talk about is 22,000, 1,200. Ratcliffe's putting forward a plan. Mainly not so much mass firings as really are buyouts. It looks like just attrition. As people retire and let go, these billets are not filled with new personnel. Like I said, all of these are kind of good first starts. You got to start somewhere, but obviously the CIA and the FBI, the process of really restructuring these doesn't, we're not taking a maximalist position out of the gate. It's a gradualist. Number one, in FBI looks like nothing's happened, or if they have. I think I hear there's 1,000 guys been let go, but I think it's more of this kind of they're let go over time as their contracts come expired. Both the FBI, DOJ, the intelligence community across the board need a massive restructuring. I'm going to go back and harp on what I harped on this morning. We're burning daylight. You need a massive restructuring of the administrative state and the in a eradication of the deep state. Eradication of the deep state. I haven't seen any names come out of the CIA being investigated. Haven't seen anybody walked out of the CIA. Are you kidding me? Given what the CIA's done over the last 4 years, over many decades, but particularly the last 4 years under Biden, or the FBI, or the Justice Department, and there's not mass firings, there's not mass arrest, there's not a fundamental, put the fear of God in them, restructuring. The same intensity we're bringing to the law firms, the same intensity you're bringing to the universities, the same intensity you're bringing to the broadcast media and cable, and there is intensity and purpose and intention. What do all these have in common? They all have one thing in common. No, evil's not the answer. That's obviously in common, but not evil. No, they're all at the public trough. Why do you have leverage over the law firms? You put in there, we're taking your security clearances. We are taking you. You're not going to be able to have any clients, serve any clients that have government contracts. Oh, by the way, if any of people still retain you, their government contracts are going to go. Boom. Paul Weiss surrenders in 24 hours. The toughest of the tough. Then Skadden Arps, everybody falls in line. Plus, they throw in, Skadden Arps throws in $100 million of pro bono work. The law firms are creating nonstop. You got a couple putting up a fight, but that's a rear guard action. The universities, Columbia completely cratered. Harvard's going to crater. In Harvard, they haven't been tough enough. They're taking away the tax-free status today, or putting that in motion. But they haven't cut off all the government grants, and government funds should be cut off immediately. I don't care if it's $7 or $8 billion. I don't care if it's cancer, the cure of cancer research. It'll get back as soon as you do what we want you to do, because we're paying for it. And if you don't want to hear what we have to say, then fine, don't take the money. That's good. Then run it yourself. Do what Hillsdale does. Larry Arnn doesn't have to listen to this because he doesn't take any government money. That's fine. Be independent. This is why now it's all, people, their heads are all blowing up. Bannon's saying you got to take on the public Ivies. University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, University of Virginia, University